First of all, from me, welcome everyone and welcome to our guests online. And thank you so much to everyone for making the trip here to help us reach the forum today. It's awesome now have everyone here face to face like this. But do you have one? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I'm not gonna talk too long. I just wanted to thank you. And we're gonna get started with some introductions. First, we'll have all of you members introduce yourselves by sharing your name and the organization that you represent. And then we'll move to our team to introduce, and then we'll move to our executive leadership team, and they'll share some remarks to get us started today. So I would like to start with Claudia. If I'm gonna maybe leave the microphone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Rizzo, and I support the local school district in City of Hillsborough as a youth apprenticeship project manager.
And I'm April Cox. I work for the Willamette Valley Community Action. I represent our program service reentry individual.
Sage Learn, I'm the Chief Staff and Executive Director of College Relations for Portland Community College.
Kristen Lima, I'm the lead of Applied Technologies Business and Information Systems at Mount Pleasant Community College.
Good afternoon, Jeff Hampton, a regional development officer with Business Oregon, the state's economic development agency.
Travis Ryan, Superintendent, Hillsborough School District. Welcome to the West Side. We're the most innovative school district when it comes to career and technical education.
I'm Kathy Bishop, driver semiconductor, and we're on the West Side. So.
Christy Wilson, Workforce Development Manager at the City of Hillsborough, also West Side.
John Worst, mechatronics teacher at Forestboro High School.
Way west.
Way west.
I'm Abby Lewis, founder and executive director of Golden Rule Reentry. We work with the formerly incarcerated, and we are way south. We're down in Southern Oregon. So thank you.
I'm Paul Sheldon. I'm the Senior Development Director at Golden Rule Reentry, and I'm Abby's alternate.
Good afternoon, I'm Eric Anderson with the Strategic Economic Development Corporation. We are economic development in Midland Valley.
Good afternoon, Dan Finley, Industrial and Engineering Systems Education Specialist for the Department of Education, West-ish.
Hello, Dave Dillon with Food Northwest Trade Association, represents key companies in Oregon, Washington, and I'm
Steve Johnson, principal of MBCB Consultants, focus on minority workforce development, and I'm on the state workforce development board.
Good afternoon, Kim Parker Janes. I'm the executive director of Willamette Workforce Partnership in the Mid Valley, and I'm also the chair of the Oregon Workforce Partnership, which is the state association of the 9 local workforce development boards.
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Gustavo Gutierrez Gomez. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Gustavo Gutierrez Gomez. I am the Economic Development Director from CDC. And my pronouns are he, his, him, and gracias.
Hi, I'm Kyle Ritchie Noel. I'm the Director of Education and Workforce Policy for the Oregon Institute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather Desart with Northwest Oregon Works. We are another local workforce development board. As Kim mentioned, we are on the coast, for coast of the state, and I'm also the vice chair of the Oregon Workforce Partnership.
Hi, everyone. Ben Strong from Vigor Ship Repair and Fabrication Company in Portland, Clackamas, and Vancouver.
Hi, I'm Carly Petrovic. I'm the senior HR manager with Microchip Technologies Oregon region.
Hello, my name is Amanda Sullivan-Astor. I'm the Forest Policy Manager with the Associated Oregon Loggers. We're a trade association that represents all of the forest contractors in the state. And then I also do all of our workforce development efforts.
Good morning. I'm Joel Sebastian. I work at the Willamette Education Service District down in Salem, and I coordinate a couple programs there, but one of them is our Career Connected Learning Program.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina Goldberg, Assistant Vice President for Economic Development and Strategic Relations at the University of Oregon.
I'm Dan Axton, I'm a plant manager at Timber Labs Northwest Application Facility.
Good afternoon, I'm Craig Campbell, I'm the Executive Director at the Oregon Manufacturing Innovation Center of Research and Development, or OMIC R&D, and also a member of the State Workforce and Talent Development Board.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jennifer Purcell, I'm the Director for Future Ready Oregon at the Higher Education Coordinating Commission.
Way south. Tom Blum, the Deputy Director of Mountain Central.
Baser, Provost and Executive Vice President at Oregon State University.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mariah Robbins. I'm the Vice President of Global People and Operations at ADA.
And I think I'm cast on behalf of us on the executive group here, and Scott, who isn't able to be here, to offer a welcome, and so welcome, good to have everybody here. And we mainly want to just say thank you for sticking with the process to this point. We have a really important meeting today. I'm not going to steal anyone's thunder and talk about the agenda, but we're going to do some key things that we've been working toward for a while. Big thank you to the funding work group for everything they did. Thanks from us to all of you who did work really hard, as Carrie said, to get here today. And I think we have some people online as well, so thank you. And this is really important work. It's been wonderful to engage with such a broad cross section of folks who work to support economic workforce development in manufacturing Oregon. So just thank you for being part of this.
I can also just say thank you and shout out to our Future Ready Oregon team. I might not run around with the microphone, but I'm just gonna shout out to Laura and Carrie and Katrina. We've got Julia back there too, and then Ronan and Emily. So we're very lucky to have an incredible team supporting all this work. So without further ado, we'll move into some of the business portion of our meeting. We'll move into public comment. Are we okay with time for that? I guess we're running a little ahead of schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now we have one person signed up for public comment, Logan Garner. Logan, I'm going to promote you as a panelist to allow you to speak and introduce yourself to the consortium. And as a reminder, you'll have 3 minutes for your public comment, and when you're ready, I will start that time for you. But first, I will promote you.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to switch to be a panelist. Is now an okay time to provide comment then? Do I understand correctly?
Yeah, Logan, can you hear
Okay.
me? This is Carrie.
Thank you. Hey, Carrie. I just want to say thanks for letting me join and throw my voice in for a minute. I was at the last meeting, and I'm really excited to kind of listen in the background. I sit on the statewide CT advisory committee as well. So this consortium has a lot of import for me from that respect as well. And I just at the last meeting, I heard some comments in the room that just kind of referred to or alluded to manufacturing positions or the sector in general as seen as kind of dangerous or dirty or and it just kind of had me prickling a little bit because so much of that messaging is something that I think is something we're working as a workforce board and with our partners to kind of overcome it and get past that bias, because I think it's a little bit dated, and there's a lot of really positive momentum in kind of changing that rhetoric and that dialogue. And so I really appreciate the efforts of this group to do exactly that. But I really wanted to bring this up at the last meeting, and I didn't see a way to do it. I somehow missed the sign up for public comment, so I think that's on me. But thank you. I just wanted to say that, and we've got a lot of really great opportunities coming down the pike in our region with respect to manufacturing and trying to help close some skills gaps. So I'm excited to be a fly on the wall today, and thank you for that little bit of time.
Thank you, Logan. And this was Logan Garner, and he is coming from Northwest Oregon Works. He's joining us remotely. So
Can you have him introduce himself?
yeah, Logan, would you be able to introduce yourself to everyone?
Oh,
Please?
of course. I'm
Thank you.
sorry. Yeah, my name is Logan Garner. I'm the Youth Programs Manager for Northwest Oregon Works, the local workforce development board for Clatsop, Columbia, Lincoln, Tillamook, and Benton counties.
Thank you. Glad you're here. Thank you for that. Anyone else, Ronan?
That's all we have at this time.
All right. Well, thank you, Logan. Thank you, Ronan. Now we'll move to the portion of the agenda where we're doing the consent agenda and approving the minutes from our last meeting. You should have those in your packet, so folks can take a look at those and then ask somebody to move to motion. I don't.
I was gonna say I was marked as excused, but I was in fact present.
Great, thank you. We'll make a note of that, sure. Does anyone else see anything that needs to be changed? Yeah, I appreciate it.
Move to approve the minutes.
All right, motion has been made to approve the minutes. It's been seconded. All in favor of approving the minutes from our last meeting in January 31st? Say aye. Aye. All opposed? Anyone abstaining? Okay, ayes have it. All right, thanks, everybody. So now we'll go ahead and jump into the next part of our agenda here. Let's see, where do we begin? So today is a really exciting meeting. We have a couple different things to do. We're going to be working with Turner, who's been at previous meetings. He is from the Oregon Consensus Group and is bringing his expertise to us today to help guide us and teach us about how to come to consensus around different issues or questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to both practice the consensus process together and try it on for size and learn more about it today. And then we'll also be using the consensus process to help guide us to our decision-making around the recommendations from the Future Ready funding team that help with the work group for manufacturing. So, yeah, I really want to thank Turner for being here. We need 20 people for quorum, and I'm looking around and it looks like we should have that. So again, huge thank you. Because we have a quorum of 20, we'll also need 20 votes to pass the motion, and then from there, yeah, we'll ask for your feedback about how the process felt, what it was like, and we're actually going to use this process for our governance and update the charter to reflect this new way of coming to decision making. So we'll discuss that further at our next meeting. You know, the other part about being a part of this group that I just really want to highlight today is, especially as we move into having some pretty complicated conversations about where we're going to land, is that, you know, you've all been invited to this table for a couple of reasons. One is to represent the organization that you are with and to share your expertise in this space. The other reason is because this is a collective shared table, and this is a space where we're bringing people together from different spaces and places in our workforce system. And to that end, I really invite all of you today to maybe take off your organizational hat, if you will, while you're here, and really deeply listen to one another as much as you can. I'm saying this as much for me as for you, but you know, being able to be present, these are very complicated issues we're facing in the workforce system and very nuanced, and they require nuanced understanding to lead to better solutions, which again is why it's really critical to have a table with folks from such broad spectrum on the manufacturing world. And so again, just an invitation to really listen to each other. You all have so much to offer. I feel humbled just getting to stand in front of all of this group itself. So with that said, I would like to turn it over to Turner and he can help guide us through the consensus process. So thank you everyone for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, again. My name is Turner Odell. As Carrie mentioned, I work with the Working Consensus Program at Portland State University in the Hatfield School of Government, and we are part of the National Policy Consensus Center at University. And Tech asked if we would help kick off these consortium groups, meetings, and help the groups find a rhythm and a pace for making decisions and working collectively and by consensus ideally. So I'm here to kind of help you guys try to make some consensus-based decisions today by using some consensus building tools as part of our decision-making and discussion process. So the heck, yeah, there we go. Is proposing a consensus-based decision-making approach. The goal is to advance this consortium decision by consensus using some consensus building tools to help get there that allows the group to kind of work an issue systematically, try to meet everyone's interests around the table to the maximum extent possible. If after a good faith effort and the groups work hard, but it just seems like it's not going to come to a full consensus agreement, then the executive leadership team can decide that consensus was not going to be possible and decisions can be made at that point by a majority vote if necessary. But so far in these processes, we've been pretty successful in finding that common ground, something that everyone can live with. As outcomes from the meetings that the other consortium have gone through so far. As the slide mentioned, this is a little more time consuming than just putting a measure on the table and voting on it up or down, but it does offer some opportunity to build more nuanced solutions that meet more interests and more needs from around the table, which ultimately ends up in solutions or answers that are or ways forward that are more durable and resistant to the folks trying to change them somehow or another. So in our experience, it's worth the effort to get there, and it's kind of an interesting process along the way too, usually. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to a tool that we use. There we go. All right. So you'll each have these set of cards in front of you, and there are 3 of them. There's a red card, yellow card, and green card. Some of you may have used this tool before, or a similar tool involving thumbs and that sort of thing. But basically, it's a way of not voting, but polling the room to see whether there is some consensus around a particular proposal. Right. So if you're hearing a proposal and you're going, oh, that's really great, that meets my needs, I'm really excited about that. Or on the other end of that spectrum, like, that's fine, I can live with it. I don't have any concerns that need to be addressed. Then when we call for the poll, you show a green card. If you've got some concerns you'd like to have addressed, maybe a suggestion for a change, it's not like hugely problematic, but you have an idea that would make it better from your perspective, then you might put out a yellow card. And that says, I want to have a little more conversation about it. If that proposal that's on the table is really problematic, just doesn't work for you, you have to oppose it. Because it's got a flaw that doesn't meet your interests or really, it's harmful to what you're trying to accomplish. Then you would put out a red card, and then we have to have more conversation. So the trick is, or the add-on is that if you're gonna put out a yellow or a red card, you're under some degree of obligation to offer a solution for how to make it better, and a solution that you think will work for others, but will address your interests in particular. So this gets back to, if you recall, several meetings ago, we talked about, some of the principles behind building consensus. One of them is that you have to work just as hard to meet everyone else's interests around the table as you do to meet your own. And we're all coming from lots of different spaces. I mean, we're all kind of working towards the same goal, right? Is to develop a workforce in a way that's going to serve the needs of priority communities as well as the industries that rely on. So we're headed all in the same direction, but we may have, some differences about how to get there. So does everyone understand kind of how this polling process works? I got a green card. Right, we can use green and yellow cards and red cards for everything from now on.
All right.
No, but so let's try a little example. So there's a proposal on the table. We could go for that. There we go. This proposed decision-making approach. So this is the proposal for the way this group will do its decision-making. That was not addressed specifically in the charter, and there's a desire for heck to include this in the charter, so there's a decision-making mechanism in place for this group. Since you're going to make a decision later today, it would be good to do this now, probably. So my proposal is that we use this as an example for how to use these cards. So if this proposal for how to make decisions in this group looks good to you, you would hold out a green card. If you've got a suggestion maybe for how to make it better or to address a problem that you see within it, then you might hold out a yellow card. And if this is something that you really have a serious problem with, then you might want to hold out a red card. And we'll have discussion, and we'll go around the room and make sure that all the green cards are good to go, but then we'll address any concerns that are behind the red or yellow cards that are displayed. And then we'll try again. And we'll try to work to the point where we all have green cards. Make sense? All right, so the proposal on the table is up here. Goal of advanced consortium decisions by consensus, use consensus building tools. If after a good faith effort can't get there, then decisions can be made by a majority vote. All right, let's see where people are at. Red, yellow, or green cards. Okay, we got one yellow, another yellow, 3 yellows. Okay. And 4 yellows. Okay. We will go around the room and address the yellow cards. Start with you, and I'm going to pass around the mic. So I don't know that it was mentioned earlier, but we have folks participating online and recording the meeting for Zoom, and we need to use the microphone in order for people to hear us. So I'm going to pass the microphone around.
All right. So the issue that I have with the current outline is that I feel like we need to define good faith. And whether that's an amount of time, if the intent is to make a decision today, how much time will we spend discussing and trying to get consensus? That would be one potential solution, and we could have a discussion about what that would look like. I would also offer that in the spirit of consensus, that we might want to look for a supermajority vote rather than just a majority vote, a simple majority to move forward with this, with the decision if we needed to go to a vote. So those would be my suggestions.
Go around, pick up all the yellow card suggestions, and then we'll grapple with that and try to come up with a new whatever proposal.
So I think mine's pretty simple and probably is something that is addressed in our charter to some extent, that I should know forwards and backwards, but. When we say complete consensus, that means a unanimous decision, we don't always have everyone present, so I assume that we mean complete consensus of those who are present in the room. So as long as we all agree on that, that we don't wait and there's no confusion later, that we are going to reopen decisions made because we didn't have a unanimous decision, then I'm fine.
So the clarification offered is that it's a consensus amongst those who are present, both maybe in the room and on the.
Yes, yeah, present at a meeting.
Present at the meeting. As long as there's a quorum, I think, looking to our expert, if there's a quorum, then we're fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or is the other, or is jealous? Oh.
I'm an alternate member, not a full member, and so I think we need to clarify, is it only voting members who are holding up cards, or are other guests participating in this process? And then I have one other question, really. I've been studying sociocracy for a number of years, and they have one more category, which is consent. It's a middle ground between consensus and majority vote, where it's like, no, this doesn't express my preferred scenario, and I may have some concerns about it, but I'm willing to consent in order to move the process forward. And I kind of think that's a yellow card, or it's kind of a greenish card. I don't know where it is in this process.
So you bring up a very good point that I neglected to mention, which may have been noted on one of the slides. But there is an option to stand aside, which I think is getting at the same thing that you're saying. So I don't care enough to vote. It's like, I'm not necessarily happy with it, but I'm not gonna get in the way. So I'm gonna, it's essentially like a zero card.
Yeah, that's different from consent, which is, I'm consenting, I'm not standing aside, I'm going along with it, but I want it registered that this is not my preferred scenario. I just, as a social activist, I always end up in the parking lot, mediation process.
My suggestion would be to display the yellow card and then say it.
Yeah.
And just real quick,
Yeah.
in terms of alternate voting,
Okay.
we have folks here who all are alternates, and as an alternate, if you're here for someone that can't make it, you'll be voting, but otherwise, it's the primary voting member's responsibility to vote.
And does that go for discussion as well? So we just hold silence and let the primary representatives do the carding?
Oh, absolutely not. We want to hear from everyone.
Yeah.
Good question.
I have a chicken and egg one. So to use this, I would have to have a document that says this is what we agreed on. This is the box that we're gonna talk about this in, and we all agree on that. So that if we vote this in, and then you show me something that I don't agree, or I don't know what the parameters that we're operating. And so then how do we then vote after that? So if there is, since what we're talking about here, it has to be clear to everyone, this is what we agree upon as our way forward to answer these questions. Otherwise, I would get stuck with a red card like this was my assumption versus I know we all agree upon, and then we vote on that, we all agree upon this is the parameter. Now we can move forward and use this, but now we can go back and say, this is what we're voting, we all agreed upon. This was our pathway.
So if I understand you correctly, I think what the intention would be today would be to work from that as the box to start with. And then actually formulate any amendments to that if we want to, perhaps addressing, defining good faith or what that means, or replacing that language with something else. And What were the other ones? Carrie, were you tracking
Say it again.
the other proposals that were put out?
Well, we've got Amanda with the yellow card and talking about, I don't remember,
Fine, well,
but then Mariah,
Mariah was,
Just around defining consensus, as far as
oh,
being present.
right, I think we can specify that in there.
yeah.
I actually have one other question also. Do
Yeah.
I presume in the background is Robert's Rules of Order?
I do not think this group operates by Robert's rules of order. I can't operate this group. By Robert's. And I don't think that's not been the practice. More strong. So I'm gonna ask the folks that have, I think we can deal with Mariah's concern by just specifying in this decision-making process that consensus is achieved if those who are in the room and online reach consensus.
And then we had Amanda. Amanda, can you restate yours?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, do you have a specific proposal for how to address good faith?
Yeah, I'm happy to get other people's opinions, absolutely. I was just saying that depending on the parameters in which we need to make a decision, obviously consensus, depending on the type of decision we're trying to make, can take a long time. Especially with a larger group like this, a larger body. So, good faith might be, getting back to kind of the assumptions, might be assumed to be one thing by one person and something else by somebody else in the group. And so, who is making that call? Is that kind of like our executive team, all of our co-chairs, right? That are sort of making the call for good faith? Are we gonna set sort of a somewhat arbitrary time limit? Is it so many meetings of which we have to make a decision? I think that there's a lot of ways that we could define that. So I'd be kind of asking the rest of the group, what do you guys think associated with some of the things that I highlighted? The second one was about, should we look at majority vote, just a simple majority of those in the room, or a super majority in the spirit of consensus? So I personally like super majority. I think it's more in the spirit of consensus, but then obviously we have to know how the voting member, and that'll be a little bit of a moving target, but I would prefer that. Some people don't feel like they're in railroad or something.
Okay, so what I hear is a proposal to have consensus or a vote that, well, let's start with that part, because that's the easier to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll take the low hanging fruit first. That I would suggest that whatever the decision is, and however it's going to be made, whether it's by consensus or if it's not by consensus because it can't get there, that the decision is made by those who are participating either in the room or online that day. So the supermajority would be of that group, not a supermajority of the entire consortium. So I'm going to clarify your proposal with that, if that makes sense. Okay. And then, so the other part, does anyone have, and by the way, if you want to get into the discussion, an easy way to indicate that without trying to wave at me is part of what that. So, okay, so Paul, your thought on.
Regarding consensus, an underused aspect of Robert's Rules of Order, which we're not using, is unanimous consent. Rather than putting things to a vote or working to consensus, a proposal can be made requesting unanimous consent. And if no one objects, then we're done.
How is that different from?
It leapfrogs the discussion. In other words, on many matters, discussion is not necessary. So a member will say, chairperson, I request unanimous consent to go to lunch 15 minutes later. And if nobody objects, we're done. We don't have to discuss it. We don't have to vote. We have unanimous consent. I don't know if that fits into this.
Thanks.
What we've discussed so far presupposes that we have operational definitions for majority, supermajority. We probably ought to decide where we are there and exactly what those constitute rather than generally understood concepts of majority and supermajority. And basically a definition of consensus, because I think there's some murkiness between majority and consensus. It's defined by some as the assent or opinion of most, but then there's that fine line issue of exactly what does most constitute. Is that plurality? Is that 2/3? Is that 3/4? So I think some operational definitions would help that are either provided and we reach a consensus on, or that we create.
So as to the definition of supermajority, I would entertain any suggestion whether that's 2/3 or whatever it is. And then to your other point was,
Okay, so majority, supermajority, and differentiating, pardon me, need to speak up, differentiating as to what.
consensus. So under the way this works is that you don't have consensus until everyone has a green card up, which means at least that everyone can live with it. There's no, that is the definition of consensus using this tool. So if that's the tool you're using to get to consensus, then everyone has indicated they can live with it. It's not a majority, it's not a, whatever most people think. It's not like there's leaving yellow cards up if we don't, or red cards, as far as that goes. It would be, it's got to be all green to advance it. And at that point, it would be the motion, or whatever, the formal decision making. Does that make sense?
It sounds like it actually exceeds the level of the high water mark of supermajority. Now everyone kind of agree.
Right, the goal is to find, so the goal of the consensus-based decision-making process is for this whole room to be in agreement about what, whatever the decision is, later today, maybe about the funding RFAs. So, yes, it is in excess of supermajority. Supermajority is the fallback, apparently. Or, you know, could have been majority vote, but the suggestion is to make it supermajority, which will take the temperature on that in a minute. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sounds a lot like Delphi.
Like what?
Delphi.
Yeah.
Delphi.
It's,
Okay, I don't know.
it's all right, we'll talk later.
Okay.
Sidebar.
Sidebar.
All right, so where are we?
We've got.
Got the new proposal would be, well, so.
Can I clarify my position?
Yes.
So as long as whatever discussion, because there has to be a sheet, because we've had a lot of discussion, a lot of different groups, and so, okay, this is what we're gonna talk about. And so if there's a sheet that can show it, how we got to that, then that's the starting point for me to have a discussion, that if we all now know how collectively we got to this. And then now we're talking about, can we live with this, or we agree with this, and also how we drive that this was a priority that we're having a discussion on. So as long as there's something that was given to us beforehand to start the conversation about if there's consensus, we have to be all clear about how we end up with this. Does that make sense?
You're saying like where the idea of adopting consensus came from, or is that?
No, I'm saying
The thing.
we're here to talk about.
Oh,
something. I don't
got
know
it.
what it is.
Oh, okay.
All
All right.
Consensus on it. This one here, what I'm saying is, add this, that there is a document that we get to look at that says, this is how we got to this. Because we got a lot of stuff, some of us read something, some of us read it, and all these different groups, and somehow we got a consensus. We said, this here is what we're now going to talk about.
Let's see.
And if there's something that says, this is how we ended up with this, to put before the group.
kind of like the tip chart or something.
That we can all look at.
Process.
This is how we got to have this discussion.
Process maps.
So if that's part of the problem, then I can say, yeah, green. But I'm still stuck in yellow, yes. I don't, I don't know, going into.
The process for this was the proposals that the Higher Education Coordinating Commission made for how this group, this consortium group would make decisions. So they are proposing that.
Right.
And I think maybe in some, with some conversation amongst the executive leadership team. And then as we go through this consensus building process, we will add or subtract, we'll make amendments to this, which we will articulate. I don't know that we can create a document in real time, but we will articulate them clearly so that in concept, everybody knows what they're polling on the next time around, and to see if we can find all green or all consensus around the modified proposal. Does that make sense? Steve?
As a system, yes.
And then it'll come back. If it gets misrepresented somehow, there's a misunderstanding, they'll bring it back at the next meeting in writing. You won't have it in writing today, but they'll bring it back to the next meeting, just make sure everybody agrees that we got it right.
This process was used in the healthcare consortium, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay, just if that, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, yeah, the healthcare and the technology both went through this. And they, healthcare made a couple of modifications to the decision-making process. I can't remember what they were in. I don't think technology made any modifications to the decision-making process as proposed. But later in the same meeting, so you all are the third consortium to have this kind of meeting where we do this, and then we do some decision-making around the RFA proposals that the work group put together. And those were subject to quite a bit of change, I think, in both groups. That made significant changes to those proposals based on discussion and using this tool. So it's worked a couple times with your colleagues.
Thanks. I just want to make sure I'm clarifying and Steve, tell me if this is incorrect, but it sounds to me like your question isn't so much about the decision-making process. It's more about what you are going to get to evaluate based on how we arrive at the proposals that are being made. So and then having a written documentation. So part of the process here might clarify that we're going to make sure we take good minutes and decisions that are made here so that there is some sort of decision. And we're leaving here to decide this is how we want to divvy up $12 million, that we can agree as a group that we're going to take good minutes. We're going to have a good decision-making process so that there's a record. But I think I'm kind of understanding you that the decision-making process isn't really what you're questioning, is how do we know that what we're agreeing on and how we arrive at those decisions, we actually have consensus on what we're voting on. Does that help summarize?
Yes, and there's a different approach that business would take to this versus public agency would take to this. So they start out fundamentally at odds as to what the solution is, and that's why I say to understand how do we get to this.
Sure.
So that you can overcome that starting point of, I don't know where this is gonna go, but if on the business side, I would start differently. And I just want to just look at, be able to say how we got to that. And then fine, then we can head and talk about that, because it is about consensus within people from the group.
And I think when we use this in this is a little convoluted because we're kind of voting on itself. And it's, you know, it's a little, but this later, and in the next session here, we'll hear a proposal from the working group that includes how they got there, how they developed the proposal, what their parameters were and their sideboards, and then introduces a proposal. So I think that's getting at what you're saying. It shows the origin more clearly of where that proposal came from.
That's what I was asking.
And this one just came from a screen 3 minutes ago, pretty much.
Right, but I didn't want to vote on something that I didn't know that part, because then that takes away my concern.
Okay, cool. Their hands or cards up. All right, so we have Does anyone have a suggestion for how to define supermajority? I mean, I can offer it, but it should really come from y'all. 2/3?
Like the 2/3 or greater, I mean, I don't.
2/3 or greater.
Good idea. 2/3.
Gotta practice like talking about stuff too, so it goes with all of this. All right, the vote on the table is as follows. This plus, well, we got one more thing to resolve. The majority voting part is now a super majority, which is 2/3 or more, and it's the participants, both for consensus purposes and for voting, if it comes to that in the circumstances, are those who are in the room or online, so long as there's a quorum present. But then I can't put that in writing for you, but. And then, so the remaining issue is defining good faith. So the suggestion I heard was, making sure there's adequate amount of discussion time. So you could say something along the lines of discussion is allowed, I'll right.
So I was just gonna define, because I'm not sure that everybody understands what the ELT means, but that's the executive leadership team. So with this, it's kind of saying that if after a good faith effort, the three of us and Scott, if you were here, we conclude that we don't feel like we are getting to a point where there's too many red cards, or there's too many places where we really feel like we aren't in agreement, then we would say we're gonna bring it to a vote. But essentially what that line is saying to me, and I'm not sure that everybody understood what ELT meant, so I wanted to be clear about that we're kind of calling the shots of, do we feel like we are good here, or are we pushing? And that's part of our role, is to make sure that we're not trying to push something through where we don't have consensus. So I'm comfortable with that understanding, but I wasn't sure that everyone else understood that.
Other thoughts? Not hard yet.
It's really a comic relief, but by what process does the ELT conclude?
Using consent. The proposal is arm wrestle. So the good thing is done to the executive leadership team to determine whether there's going to be a big effort. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm totally good with that, as long as we all agree that that is the mechanism that you guys have the privilege as the ELT to make that decision, about that motion, right? Like, we need to make a decision. We've had a lot of discussion. We all, I guess maybe this is to the point of Paul, like, we all agree that this is where we need to move, right? And similarly, right, it would probably be of those present, right? I'm Scott today, so we're not gonna wait to hear from Scott to conclude that, right? So I think that would, as long as we all agree with that and that makes sense, kind of the privilege of the ELT to make that decision. I'm good with that.
All right, so on the good faith issue, the language remains as it is. There are the other modifications I mentioned a moment ago. Now you get to try the cards out. So this proposal as modified regarding supermajority vote and what that constitutes, and that we're talking about the people around the table or online. How do we feel about this now? Looking for cards.
This is why I don't believe in the consensus.
All right, we have pressed all, I see no yellow or red cards. Anyone watch that I didn't see? I looked at this all.
How are we gonna check on?
How are we gonna what?
How are we gonna check on?
We're gonna go right now to online. Well, yes, that's what we did last time. Vote. All right.
Okay. Well, I will inquire those online.
Put it in the chat.
Well, I'll address Mariah's question. When we get to the vote on the action item for today, so this was sort of practice. New alternates. So congratulations. But when we get to the actual vote on the action item, Ronan is prepared to record the vote for those who are online.
I just have a, not getting away, the way that vote passes, so I just have a question. If someone majority is high threshold, I just kind of got to my people in this room. If something fails, what happens to it? Do we start all over again on that issue? Or is it just done?
Well, you know what, I'm gonna let the consensus expert answer.
Well, I guess it depends on what the action is that you're voting on. So if it's something that has to happen, then the ELT will have to bring it to a vote like that. And it's hard to imagine. There's only one decision point in this group so far, which is coming in a few minutes. So if that were not to pass, I guess it would go to a vote eventually after a good faith effort to reach consensus around it. And because at some point, the heck needs the input of this group to, in whatever form it comes, and they'll have the benefit of the whole discussion too. So it's not as if they'll take that vote in a vacuum. They have the benefit of everything that was said in the room, and so they have that context when they act on the recommendation, which was voted on instead of consensus. Consensus decision. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yeah, but it still doesn't answer the question of what happens if you can't get the 20 points. Okay, you can't get the 2/3.
Oh, then, yeah. That's a good
Especially
question.
if that has to.
I think it probably depends on what you're voting on. So if you're asking specifically about today's action item and the recommendations, I think it would be going back to the drawing board, and that'll be determined based on the conversation. So I think it's sort of a, it depends answer. And we'll just have to see where today's conversation goes. We'll take that on a case by case basis.
We actually have good precedent in our state for that question where legislators left the state in order to prevent something from being brought up. That becomes the prerogative of people who determine the agenda. So any matter can be brought up for reconsideration at the discretion of the people who set the agenda. And as a group of concerned citizens, any member of the consortium can also bring a matter up for reconsideration just by speaking up. So I think there's the practical element of how much do you care about this? You can let it go or you can bring it up again.
And yeah, again, I didn't want to hold up the vote or anything, didn't need to. But the other thing that I think of is, you know, I commented on the supermajority versus majority, but even in a supermajority, there's people that are unhappy or could be unhappy, right? And so in that case, you know, this doesn't talk at all about like minority reports or anything like that. I don't necessarily think that we need to get that formal, but just ensuring that we have really clear notes for the HEC to go back on. So that those people that maybe did feel the need to vote no, if we got to a vote, that their opinions were also considered. Because again, in the light of consensus, that should be something that's really clearly identified for the HEC to look at. So I just want to put that on the record.
Yep. They do take good notes for. Your name's gonna be all over them. All right, well, congratulations. You passed the practice round.
Great job.
Now, do I turn it back over to you or return it?
Actually, we'll turn it over to Christy. John, if you'll give us. Yeah, so I'll give us one to Christie. So you two can walk us through, we've got you something off here at the beginning.
Just a quick note, I did not know we were gonna do that game before this, and now like I feel pressured.
That's hard, like, and then I'll do it, because they're. All right.
So I was bit old today when I find out that I need glasses to see that, so just share with me in this moment. So thank you all for being here. I think today is one of those days that we've all been training for. And I think we've all been committed to this process, and today comes to that landing piece, so I'm super excited. So the primary work group outcomes recommendations for the next workforce ready grant request for applications, we call it RFA, included the number of RFAs and the funding amounts for each. It also had additional criteria to be considered and the types of information that should be gathered from the applicants in the RFA. So RFA is request for application, so that we keep on track. The manufacturing industrial consortium specifically advising, or we are collectively advising on the $12 million remaining ARPA funds for the WRG, funding that will advance high-tech workforce skills and occupations and careers in technology specifically. And this was the group. Pretty broad, and I had a lot of fun, and I learned more than I expected. So I really appreciate that. So the other part is I wanted to thank the commitment, people showing up and their presence. And in some tables where we were making decisions, I also want to acknowledge those who trusted that we would be able to get through those small conversations. So just wanted to thank you because we were mindful when we were not at the table that we had a responsibility and an accountability to you when we came to the big group. So so this is the process that we've been working through. The funding group met twice in February and once in March. In our first meeting, we review and discuss the guiding principles, the initial recommendations elevated during the consortium's January 31st quarterly meeting. We also review our responsibilities and the parameters for developing recommendations. As I mentioned, we met in small groups to elevate priorities, and then convened for a second meeting where we refined and further discussed the guiding principles and develop initial recommendations options. And in our third meeting, we finalized our recommendations and additional criteria for you to consider today. Today we will be finalizing and advancing the recommendations as a full consortium, and staff anticipates the RFA will be released in April. These principles are fundamental for any and all future ready workforce ready investments, including the workforce ready grants. And these are important reminders as they form the base criteria for all project proposals. And like Chris said, I didn't have time to memorize it. So during the first work group meeting, head staff presented a summary analysis of the funds and also the unfunded proposals from the prior workforce ready grants, request for applications. And to better understand the certifications and credentials were the focus of the first two rounds, and then the range of awards and the types of projects funded. After the workgroup reviewed the information from the first two rounds, the group unpacked the following questions together.
And I don't know if people recall this, and you have notes to this. But these were the things we were sort of going through on those first ones. So one of them was what jumped out of the data and the information from the funded and unfunded proposals. And we were really looking at how do these things align with the initial discussions at the quarterly meetings, and where are these gaps in the funding and strategy. Then the second one that we were looking at was how can we capture momentum in the unfunded proposals. As you all remember, we had a lot of movement in the energy with a number of proposals. And I think trying to elevate some of those that did not make it, because it ultimately was a competition, but it had some great ideas in there that we could have sort of learned from and upskill from. And then we also did how can the investment support specifically industry, identify needs, and align with the goals of the Future Ready Oregon. The discussion also led to the development of a set of guiding principles that the funding work group would use to move through the decision-making process, and we'll take a look at those shortly. And then the work group members acknowledged that while not every recommendation could satisfy each guiding principle, the final list of recommendations should consider a balance across guiding principles, and the HEC should consider these when developing evaluation criteria. And this is what you want to be for. That group will agree that funding should focus on the transferable and high demand manufacturing skills that benefits all types of manufacturing. So that was focus on the transferable and high demand manufacturing skills that benefits all types of manufacturing. 1. 2, include training on essential employability skills. So that was include training on essential employability skills. The next one was create pathways for priority populations to access education and training programs and lead to upward economic mobility. So that was to create pathways for priority populations to access education and training programs and lead to upward economic mobility. And if you guys are hating that I'm repeating, I just want to make sure that I track it. I can't see up there, so you can read it up there or listen to me say it twice.
Thank you.
Include outreach to K-12 as a component. So that was to include outreach to K-12 as a component. Support small and medium manufacturers and/or manufacturers in rural locations engaging in regionally relevant training and upskilling opportunities. So recognizing the importance of the small and medium manufacturing to support them, and also rural manufacturer locations engaging in regionally relevant training and upskilling opportunities. Consider upskilling as a key strategy for retention of priority populations in the workforce. So consider upskilling as a key strategy for retention of priority populations in the workforce. Consider projects that address documented regional workforce demands and strong partnerships with industry. Strong partners with the industry may include commitments between the industry and the grant proposals. So consider projects that address documented regional workforce demand and strong partnerships with industry. Strong partnerships with the industry may include commitments between industry and grant proposals. See it. Consider the cost benefits of scaling existing programs versus investing in new programs for their initial ARPA investment. That was a good one too. So consider the cost benefits of scaling existing programs versus investing in new programs for this final ARPA investment. The project should demonstrate a plan for project sustainability, and sustainability can be addressed by factors such as replicability and sharing 1 to 2 pages, best practice with others, a plan for maintaining the project long-term or other needs. Did I miss any?
Nope.
No? Did you guys think we were good? Can you guys give yourself a hand for this work
Yes.
before you get to vote on it?
Thank you, Donna.
Yes.
Thanks.
So, yeah, the work group, which I think listed, raise your hand if you were in the work group. All right, so that was the collaborative, and, we looked over the guiding principles. One part of the conversation around, we talked a lot about innovation and sustainability, like we know. The nice thing about round 3 is we've done 2 rounds, right? And survived and learning and growing along the way. So round 1, capacity building. Round 2, there was a lot of work done. There's also a lot of projects that were unfunded, but that were awesome. So it's like, how do you kind of set it up so maybe some of those proposals, as well as new proposals, can kind of live in this space. And, you know, it's very challenging to really just hyper focus. I think another advantage of us being third in deciding how we're gonna allocate funding is just learning from others, where they're learning that they were very specific and intentional, so that we can be effective and really move the dial in round 3. So the 2 areas that we landed on were earn and learn opportunities and essentially advocacy and awareness and marketing around this demystifying all manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. So in sorts, it's like you have the awareness piece and then the connection piece, and what does that look like? And a lot of times, marketing is not funded, or there's not enough resources to be able to do that well, and collectively around the state, we could be able to do that. So, you know, ensuring that we have culturally, linguistically relevant outreach based on each community, and every community is a little bit different, right? So how do you kind of elevate those industries and the communities that they are in to just come up with something that works for that group? And the sustainability piece, again, you know, this is one-time funding, right? But we want to think like how we'll be able to continue the work. So we want to be really open to having maybe like a shared resource area where, let's say, like if Willow approves our youth apprenticeship tomorrow, fingers crossed, that could live somewhere where someone's like, that would work for us, we're interested in doing that, and we will have access to all of those resources. So some of the work that we're doing around the state can be both scalable and replicable, and just really helping each other grow whatever programs that you need. So I guess if you want to go to the next slide, is the intentional outreach. So if you guys want to take a look at that, we were very intentional with calling out K-12, obviously, just ensuring that conversations start with students and families at a young age. I think that has come up in just multiple conversations, and this will provide that kind of the framework and direction to really do that, which is the long-term game. I mean, we need a short-term game too, but and then again, just just the awareness of this, like, it's so interesting, like in Hillsborough, it's the Silicon Forest, but we have so many people in our community that have no idea what that means. How does that transfer to career? Like, I think we could really work together to really do some awesome kind of awareness and advocacy around our respective groups, and ensuring that we're really prioritizing the priority populations as outlined in the future ready Oregon. And always looking to industry for guidance. Of course, we have data, current and forecasted data that we'll use as guidance, but the voices around this room and industry really saying like, this is what we need. Especially the CHIPS Act influx of Intel about 8.5 billion today. I mean, there's gonna be just so much happening. So we just wanna make sure that people are aware of these opportunities and that they're easily accessible. So once it's where it's like how to, we had a similar work group here, and we had all of our industry partners in our AmTech group in a high school walking around, and teachers are just like, this is what I'm doing, this is the equipment, this is what I need. I mean, seemed very basic, but it was like so powerful just to be like, all right, now the industry's saying like, this is what we need. That's how, systems can change. So Just ensuring that if someone is, now aware of this field and the different types of career, how do they get there? How does that show up in K-12? How does that show up in partnering with community-based organizations? How does that show up with community college and higher ed? So, working together just to continue to ensure that access is easy and there's multiple entry points to the different careers around, to support this, the advanced manufacturing. We also were pretty intentional around calling out small and medium manufacturers, and rural locations. So we kind of wanted to, like John has said, we kind of looked at where funding was going, how funding was being allocated, and really want to also uplift small and medium manufacturers and rural areas as well. Deep with it. And aside from just like reading those, that's kind of, I mean, you guys all kind of saw the list. There was a lot of conversation around like, should we do this? Should we do this? And it's kind of hard to really focus in an area, but I think if we're very focused, we will be effective and develop some sustainable programming that will really impact our communities and our industry. And it's very exciting. So I guess with that, so essentially we would like to propose and discuss having one RFA with just 2 focus areas, and those would be the focus areas: the advocacy and awareness, intentional outreach, and then the earn and learn component as the areas. And someone could touch both of those or really hone in and focus on one of those, and that's kind of where we landed. So totally now we'll open it up to questions and discussions, and hopefully the whole group can help with the answering of the questions.
So if you all go into your package, there's actually a well-produced little document that you will be going from. And it's called Manufacturing Issue Consortium Funding Field Recommendations, which is what Christy and I just went through. It may just be handy. The other reflective thing, I'll say privilege, and one of the reflective things that I would say that once this is over, what we leave behind, we leave a sense for the HEC to continue to move this work as they look at their funding going forward. This will be left behind for them.
All right, I got a couple cards up around the table here with questions.
Just a clarification, I'm hearing the word advanced manufacturing, because I'm a nonprofit, I'm not sure. In Southern Oregon, I don't know how advanced we are, so when then you say small and medium manufacturers, is that including things that aren't advanced?
Yes.
Can someone define advanced manufacturing?
Yeah. I think, well, I don't know, I'm sure it's. The answer, it is my opinion, I feel like manufacturing would be the way to go. In our group, we have like, the Intel, the semiconductor, all the way down to the metals and wood. So I think manufacturing probably for this group would be better just to not to use that terminology. Okay, I don't know.
And I think the proposal itself doesn't use the term advanced. I mean, it's been used.
That's what this group is called, is the Advanced Manufacturing Consortium, but I think as far as like manufacturing and all numbers and things, I mean, it's not defining that it has to have. This group was purposely named Advanced Manufacturing, which is part of what I think was part of a marketing campaign to begin with, is what is this looking like to advance manufacturing in the sector in the state. But manufacturing really is defined as broadly as makers of things, so it really doesn't matter. I would say that it's very broad, and even with advanced, even within sectors, you can have advanced processes and automation and robotics, and you can have very, even within the same exact, making the same product. So it's gonna be very hard for us to put together a definition of advanced manufacturing, I think, but I don't think anybody is kind of thinking we need to say it's only on like advancing specific types of manufacturing.
And I
Yes,
yeah, and actually, that's something I learned right away coming to that hack was that if we're actually looking to broaden it as much as possible. So in a lot of spaces and places, it is called advanced manufacturing for a lot of obvious reasons. And I think from this group, to be able to broaden it out and call it manufacturing might make it seem more accessible ultimately. So landing there is probably a pretty good place to be. And so be it, that is our name, the Manufacturing Consortium.
I mean, Portland Business Journal's
Just like that.
spin on it as product makers.
I love that. Yeah, it's called so many different things now.
And I think that's part of the advocacy and awareness too. We're probably not gonna roll out and use manufacturing either. I mean, we're gonna have to use trickery and a narrative too, because, you know, manufacturing has a certain like stigma, you know, depending on where you are. So it's word play on words a little bit, but yeah.
Legislatively, it was a conversation too, and like, there was no defined thing. We found that people that were intending for the same thing on the legislation meant it broadly in different ways. Yeah.
Jeff?
Great, thank you. Thanks to the subcommittee for your work on this as well. I guess just a quick point of clarification. I think it was answered. I think you spoke to the decision of this group is a recommendation that will go to the HEC, who ultimately will be making the disbursement decisions and decide whether to adopt some, all, or none of this recommendation. But that's really what we're talking about here today, is the recommendation of this group to the HEC, if I'm understanding correctly. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
And given that, that's great. I just want to make sure I understood that. The second piece of it is I see regionally relevant show up in a couple of places here. And I appreciate the industry agnostic aspect of supporting manufacturing broadly across sector lines, but I'm not sure how regions or regionally relevant applies. I think I understand it to mean relevant to the industry within that region, but is that region countywide? Is that region, what does that look like?
To my knowledge, we've left that pretty open for folks to define. Does the future ready teams see it differently? So that's how I would say it. No.
No, I think it would be defined in the application, and I think, Jeff, I just want to circle back to your first question / comment. I do think it's important to sort of set the table about conflicts of interest. I'll remind you all that in your charter, we specifically have a conflict of interest statement. Part of what will be important today in your conversation is to really focus on informing what those priority criteria will be. We will work really hard to keep you out of the weeds in terms of how we make funding decisions, because that will really start to skirt the conflict of interest. And it's really important to us to hold that firmly for those of you who have been invited to participate in the table and may be considering applications to any of the funding opportunities. So I think that's just an important thing to state. And then to your question about defining, I think that is a place where you all can have a conversation. Do you want to define that more explicitly? Do you want to recommend that we provide examples of that? Those are the kinds of criteria that you all can be considering, and starting with what's been recommended by the funding work group, and then discussing amongst yourselves how much more detail or less detail you want to recommend to the HEC. But then ultimately, yes, the funding decisions, those decisions will be made by the HEC. And so we'll try to help you balance that as you wrestle with some of these questions today.
Okay, Steve over here.
Yeah, to hit off my own part, I forgot that Travis and Christie were on this, so I'm like, it'll be green, okay? Yeah, and I was taking. Yeah, and K through 12, I think is, to me, the most critical sector. You don't fix that, and we'll have to close the disparity gap. So I would make, you know, in the language, you know, in the guiding principle, when it talks about strong partnership with industry, that yeah, it's really important that the organizations that are out there that are sitting for funding, that you weigh their connection with the industry. And also look at the ones that have the highest reach and engagement in the priority. Again, and then what is their conversion rate for success? Because whatever we're investing in now, it has to be scalable. And so there's a lot of organizations out there that say are part of the workforce system, but don't have the reach and engagement in the priority population and don't have this strong relationship with industry. So there has to be a firm connection amongst us.
Thanks, Steve.
So I just want to clarify the idea around, or the intent of both the legislation and what these recommendations are around for priority populations, because you were intentional about putting that at the end of both. Would it be the intent of this that an earn and learn opportunity would only be for priority populations? Because I think this could potentially be confusing, like, for example, you have a program in a high school where we're doing on-the-job training. And would you exclude students that don't fit into that population? And I think the way that this is written would be such that this could have a negative connotation on the manufacturing industry. And I feel like we want to create a pipeline of all people interested, and we want to prioritize the priority populations, but I don't know that the intent is that we only want to focus on, and so.
Exclusionary.
Yeah, so I feel like we need to make sure that that wording is adjusted, because I don't feel like that's what the intent, but I do think that that's how we read it, and I think that would be a miss.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think the intent was that it must include must include priority populations, but in addition to other populations.
Thank you.
I would also like to include, if possible, about the participate in training opportunities that lead to employment, such as, and include the word scholarships, so that some of the training opportunities are to earn college credits, which then could be applied to earn those credits.
Greetings from the parking lot. First of all, thank you to the committee. This is an incredible document. You all did an amazing job of wrapping your arms around an octopus. To synthesize in this way has been awesome. There are two references to sustainability that are hot buttons for me, because before I became Abby's alter ego, I taught sustainability in business and the principles of sustainable management at Presidio Graduate School, which is the first MBA in sustainable management. So it's a hot button word for me. And I'd like to offer to help with a better definition of sustainability, because that's a really big term. We work in prisons, and the National Institute of Justice tapped me to write the book literally on sustainability-oriented practices in America's prisons and jails. And I'd love to share some of what I learned in that process with the HEC or whoever is dealing with this clause on page 2 that says HEC should provide examples in the RFA about how to do this, how to provide proposals that address sustainability. So I'm just offering to help.
Thanks to the work group. I had a question under fundamental principles, bullet 2. It says funding must be awarded to community-based organizations or workforce service providers. And I wondered if that is a restriction to those types of organizations in the Senate bill, or if we could consider expanding who the recipients might be. One of my main concerns is that if we have programs at high schools or community colleges that can quickly adapt to meet the needs of workforce demand. Sometimes I like to be able to apply for the money directly. I understand the value around partnering. Thank you.
Yeah, that includes.
Community-based organizations and workforce service providers are the eligible applicants according to the statute. And there are definitions of those in the statute, which I was feverishly trying to pull up on my laptop. But workforce service providers does include educational program delivery organizations, institutions.
So, including K-12. Including K-12?
I will double check them. I'll double check the K-12 component, but I believe that is true in the definition, yeah.
Carrie says that there's a sheet in your, oh, there's not, no, fine.
I handed you a link there.
Oh, thank you. That's right. We can tussle for this one. All right, so we're gonna thing and then. Over there, I can't do it.
Yeah, my main questions were on definitions, and that was one of them, community based, so I can look at things. I can find a statute where I'm delineated there, but also rural, and there's like 8 different definitions of rural MSDA. And the size delineation around small and medium, whether that's defined statutorily or like.
Great. I'm gonna run it back to
Yeah.
It's like a dance, it'll all be fine, yeah. Community-based organizations, workforce service providers are defined in statute. I'm working to get that, pulled up real quick. And then, rural and frontier, we are using, OHSU's Office of Rural Health definition. We've been using that as foundational to all of our data collection, but it's based on zip code. And their definition of rural and frontier is based on population density. So that's the second. Small and medium manufacturers, that is not defined in the Future Ready Oregon statute. So that would be a space where you all, again, could help inform how we define that and if we define that. I think the question, and of course Jeff has to step out really quick, but the question is that Business Oregon might have a definition for small and medium-sized manufacturers, but we can follow up. Jeff will be right back.
Thank you. I was gonna say, first of all, thanks for the invite. Trinity couldn't be here, so she sends her apologies. Anyway, I wanna say that this looks wonderful, the work that everybody has done. Do wanna touch one piece, privilege. You know, the thing is, we all have some type of privilege, and I think that the intentionality into the priority populations, even though it seems a lot of money, it's nothing, really. You know, it's a drop in the bucket. There's people like myself and maybe many of you that, you know, didn't have any privileges, and perhaps I'm here because I was able to go to college, you know, and I was able to do things that a lot of people in my family couldn't. And it has nothing, a lot of times has nothing to do even with affordability. Sometimes has to do with us, you know, state of mind. You know, because if you were born making tamales, you are tamalero, and that's what you do. So my mom was a seamstress. I was supposed to be, I don't know how it's called, a guy making, you know, tailor. There you go. I was supposed to be a tailor, so I know a lot about the industry of, you know, clothing and fashion, but I didn't want to do that. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is like priority. The only reason I think priority is in there is because I think it's people with less privilege, whatever that means, and I think everyone, either if you have a lot of privilege, you will have someone in your family who does not, and I think it's for people like them. So thank you for doing this.
All right. Got a lot of cards up over here.
Thank you. Just a quick statement that oftentimes individuals involved in 912 programs comprise individuals who represent or are part of priority populations. So that's important to consider as individuals develop their proposals. There are at the moment about 91 manufacturing programs operating within the state of Oregon at the secondary level as Perkins approved programs to study. So there's no real shortage of them. It's building the links and the connections with them. And that does go a long way toward taking care of the front end or one of the ends of the funnel. And certainly opens up the opportunity to build the succeeding generations while at the same time using the outreach and development of incumbent workers and bringing them to other levels. So essentially, raising all the boats or taking the bridge both ends at the same time.
Yeah, there. Yeah, thank you to the work group for doing the work. I think I'm glad to see the connectivity to industry. I was hoping to see something that really is a criteria tied to allowing the participating manufacturers to be innovative, whether it's skills for incumbent workers to help the business automate, to help them do product development, innovative processes, innovative products. I'd like to see something there that specifically, had the manufacturers gains, in addition to the worker, the trainees gains that they don't take on.
Yeah, I don't request, I think this is a good reminder of what the priority populations were, so I'm gonna read it. I won't read it twice, I'll say it very slow, but so we get to time. So priority populations include communities of color, women, low-income communities, rural and frontier communities, veterans, persons with disabilities, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated individuals, members of Oregon's tribes, older adults, and individuals who identify as members of the LGBTQ+ community.
So, Mariah, you stepped on a landmine. No, but this is the uncomfortable conversation that have to be had. So, yeah, so this bill has been sold as future urban for minority workforce development. Okay, and yes, that's it, but we have the context of the overall shortage of workers, period. Okay, but it is understood, and from minority communities, this is their bill. So when you talk about expanding beyond that, there is the only thing that's in the priority community that allows you to expand it is underserved or what was one of that's something to do with poverty communities?
So women, low-income communities.
Low-income communities are only opening to expand beyond the rest of the priority. So just so you know, as you go forward with the bill, within the minority community, they see this as theirs. So
I can jump in, I found those definitions, so Steve, I'll just expand also to include, so the priority populations that are included in the bill are the ones that Jonah just read, and that the investments are intended to connect to emphasize recruitment, retention, and career advancement opportunities for these priority populations. The bill specifically states that program may award grants to workforce service providers and community-based organizations, which I'll give you the definition of in a moment, that administer workforce programs in healthcare, manufacturing, and technology, and prioritize equitable program participation by individuals from the priority populations. So that language is in statute, prioritize equitable participation by individuals from priority populations. And then the definition of community-based organization is includes nonprofit organizations that are representative of a particular community or specific segments of a community that are located within or in close proximity to the community served, and culturally specific organizations, which include organizations that serve a particular cultural community, in this case, those priority populations identified by Jonah, primarily staffed by and led by members of that community that demonstrate intimate knowledge of the lived experience of that community, including but not limited to the impact of racism or discrimination on the community, specific disparities in access to services and resources, and community strengths, cultural practices, beliefs, and traditions. A workforce service provider includes nonprofit and public workforce education training and career services providers, and government entities that are providers of workforce development services, including tribal governments. Yes, and I'll just name that these definitions are included in slide decks from previous meetings, so if folks wanna access those, they are available on the Industry Consortia website.
Yeah, and so my comment, I just want to clarify, was not that we would not, whether we want to even think about moving away from the priority populations. I was only specifically mentioning that the two are in contradiction to each other, because as we're trying to broaden and move away or this awareness or marketing of the industry, I would hate for somebody to have a negative experience, especially in education was the main area I was worried about it, to say, yeah, but it's not really for you. I feel like we're saying two different things. And so I would want to make sure that a kid that's interested in manufacturing, because there's plenty of that, where you have a kid that might be interested in manufacturing and the parents say, you don't want to go down that path, it's like we heard at the very beginning of the call, it's dirty, it's not gonna have a good pay. And so making sure that we're not being exclusionary specifically around youth, because we want to build a pipeline for the manufacturing industry, but I absolutely understand the intention, and I absolutely believe that each of these grant funds should be prioritized for priority populations as intended. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't saying, especially in youth programs, that we would exclude participants only on that factor. So that was my focus, but to understand, I mean, I absolutely understand and support where this work is going.
Yeah, good. Christy and Amanda and Steve. Where you got?
I just wonder, if it would be helpful to also, just because the scholarships was called out and that was like in our heads, but it says inclusion of wraparound supports, if we should also define those, or do that up to head to define those, but that was around, scholarships, housing, some of the models we looked at were like the quick start model and how that financial incentive for everybody to learn, because people's time is so valuable. Having that financial incentive really was, removed the barrier and was a driver to people connecting with that. And then the stats for that and defining priority population, I think we're like at 87%, or something like that. So I don't know, I don't want to dive into that, like identify percentages, but I just want to echo what you said, that there is a priority, but there will be groups in education and entering marketing that will also be.
I think wraparound supports in previous grants was defined.
It was.
Yeah, in the earlier.
Wraparound sports actually defined it here too.
Is that, oh, yes, okay.
Or examples of it, I should say.
All right, I have a few things that have been brewing in my head. First thing, I will just note that my organization did apply, I think in the first round or the second round for a grant associated with this. So there, is potentially a conflict of interest there, just I want to put on the record. I was not engaged at all in the development of that application. We did not get that fund. So, but just want to put that on the record for everybody, just for transparency. So the comments that I have, first thing is there was we had kind of a discussion around manufacturing, small, large, kind of this regional workforce demand, sort of defining those things. I want to highlight as far as from associated owner loggers, and I think just generally that we want to be thinking too about like supply chain generally around manufacturing. Like it's not just people working in a plant or a facility that we're talking about. It's ensuring that we have a robust and sustainable manufacturing industry, right? Industries around the state, so that includes different parts of the supply chain. So we don't really talk about that at all in here, and the bill doesn't necessarily, the statute didn't necessarily get into that specifically, but it might be something of interest that seems to have come up here in maybe a few different types of words and language. But it might be something that we wanna highlight or figure out how to incorporate that to make sure that we are not pushing people away or people thinking that they are not eligible to apply for these funds because it doesn't feel like it speaks to them, right? And to me, that kind of gets to Mariah's comments around, and I specifically pointed out the same thing in my notes around the earn and learn opportunities for priority populations. And trying to think about, making sure that, yes, we want to emphasize priority populations, but I know in many of our sectors and many of the groups that we work with, right, like we will take anybody to a certain degree, and so we don't want to be exclusionary, and so I don't know if that's thinking about the priority populations from more of a scoring perspective versus an eligibility perspective. And maybe we could get something from the HEC on that. I don't know how much engagement we have with sort of how eligibility versus like scoring rubrics are managed, but again, trying to make sure that we're really that we are really comprehensive in the types of applications that we get, and then how we score those or add additional points to that scoring, you know, to emphasize these things that we're really interested in, like how these projects are serving priority populations, you know, just trying to like kind of skirt that line. And I got one other thing, but if somebody, John, you wanna, yeah. Yes.
But I need Okay. I want to be really, really clear. Future Ready Oregon advances opportunities for the 10 priority populations in statute. Bottom line. So whether we include those words or we don't include those words, these funding opportunities specifically advance opportunities for individuals that are members of the 10 priority populations. Period, nonstop. Understand? Okay, I don't wanna be wishy-washy on that, like, that is our statutory charge.
Yeah, and just my comment to that would be for those that read bills, that engage in legislature, that look at statute all the time, we get it, right? But like the people that I serve in rural communities that are incorporated in that,
Absolutely.
they read priority population and I don't think that means them because it never really has.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to be very clear about that, the
Absolutely.
way we talk about it in these applications and, you know, yes, we all know what that means. But I would hope that we can continue to clarify that to communities that, and so they know that they are included.
Absolutely. And no, and I appreciate that, but my comment was not directed specifically to Amanda. I just want to be really clear, and yes, all of our outreach materials do add that definition. In addition, I think it's important that folks know that the HEC has contracted with technical assistance providers who support applicants through the application process, help them to understand how their project proposal or their own organization fits with that. And then I think we have Kim and Heather here as well, who can attest to the working closely with the 9 local workforce boards to make sure that this opportunity is understood across the state.
Awesome, thank you. I think that's good, you know, these are the types of things we need to get out in the open. The last thing that I just wanted to highlight, is I think a lot of this, there's a little bit of language around kind of where I wanna go, but a lot of this looks like, recruitment and not a lot about retention or like upskilling current employees or thinking about how to deal with retention. I know a lot of us see a lot of turnover right now in manufacturing in particular, and in kind of these heavy, kind of skilled or technical jobs, and so I think just broadly, people are seeing a lot of turnover. And so, I don't know if it was intentional for the work group to really focus on recruitment, or if there were conversations around trying to balance the focus between recruitment and retention.
Yeah, it's one of their group on Sunday.
Just to that, we're trying to incorporate both, in the guiding principle, it mentions upskilling for, educate for retention of priority population. And then we included it under the, somewhere else too, but if it's not resonating or the intent was to also not move priority populations into entry level jobs and be like, check, you know, to have some sort of a career ladder. So if that's not articulated, I believe that was the intent. That's a good one.
Yeah, and that's helpful. The way that I read it from the outside, not having been in those conversations, it looked very focused on kind of like outreach, awareness. Those are all like new people that don't know about these opportunities, right? And then earn and learn, I guess, I think about a lot of those, that, obviously there's more opportunities there for upskilling within, and there's some language in here about incumbent and prospective employees. But again, I feel like, and maybe I don't know enough about other sectors, right, to know that those opportunities exist broadly across sectors in manufacturing, for upskilling of kind of incumbent employees, but it just seems like a lot of what I see around apprenticeship programs or, different scholarships and things like that seem to be a little bit more heavy focused on getting new people into the workforce rather than retention. So I just wanted to highlight that as maybe a potential that we could do a little work on that.
Okay, I got a bunch of cards up and we're at our time officially to take a break, so I'm gonna see who's putting his card down. I appreciate that, just. Dave's been waiting here for a while to speak, and then Ben and Gustavo. That was putting his card down. All right, so we'll take these two and save, okay, and then we'll take a break and we're gonna come back. But before we take a break, I'm gonna give you a homework assignment, so.
So I want to be mindful of sticking at the guideline and principle level and not diving into the operationalization of all of this, but I am thoughtful about, one thing I didn't see, in the principles, and maybe I missed it, but in kind of the question of breadth versus depth a little bit, is there some value in this top level guidance for the future processes around, are we gonna try to cover as many of the identified populations as possible? Are we gonna try to have geographic diversity, in the outcomes? Is there some kind of guidance with an eye toward criteria, not set criteria, with an eye toward criteria around, so I've been in a lot of grant evaluating, committee situations, and, you've got this question of, we've got these 10 priorities. There's one priority that had 5 great applications, very high quality applications. So do you go by merit? Do you get, is it the likelihood of success? Those kinds of things, or are you trying to touch the different, trying to spread across the priority area? So I don't know if that's clear, but I don't know if there's a principal level comment about that to help guide.
So I believe Jennifer can respond to that. So remembering that these are recommendations to help guide the HEC, and the HEC has decision making and then their own criteria.
Thank you. I just really wanted to turn it out to the red back here. David's a great question. I think it does skirt into sort of that funding decision piece, but I can tell you how the Technology Industry Consortium addressed this. They added to the additional criteria, which you have both in your handout and up on the screen, that HEC should prioritize awards to maximize the impact across both focus areas. That's the specific language because technology had 2 focus areas similar to this. But you could provide some direction that HEC should prioritize awards to maximize the impact across whatever you decide. But then beyond that, it would be HEC staff determining the final criteria.
Sorry, I was debating about, this is priority population conversation. But I guess I wanna, in addition to agreeing that we will take all comers at this point in time, as we consider the forward movement of this and how information, particularly how any potential proposal would market what we're doing here, the priority population thing is actually a double-edged sword, right? It's not just about the potential of excluding somebody, it's also about giving the perception that these jobs are only for people who otherwise could not go even 4 years degree, right? We want this to be a positive pathway, not the only pathway for certain populations. That somebody who would have been into multiple of those categories as a kid, we were actually being told you can only go get a 4-year degree, that's your only way out. And now I want to avoid us flipping that script and saying you can't get one, this is your only way, right? So be very intentional about how we market the jobs, not necessarily the people going into them, right? But there was an earlier comment about these are not dirty, dangerous jobs. I was looking actually at OSHA data. You are safer at our shipyard than in many office jobs in this state. Okay, so just making clear that marketing is about the jobs and creating that pathway, making sure people can come in.
And then the second thing I would say is, just in the guiding principles, it's like number 8, there's more in here. In the recommendations, but as a spokesperson for industry, you should be asking us to do more. You should be asking us to have stronger partnerships with the organizations and the organizations to have stronger partnerships with us. Both so that it's crystal clear what we need when the decisions are made about what kind of training is available and needed. But also so that it's not just about picking from anybody that we have, but actually about wildly increasing the number of people in the pipeline. So it's actually okay if we don't retain all of our employees, right? Because somebody else wants to come work for us. So just thinking about how this is a little bit more reflective of not just what the industry needs, but the overall growth of the pipeline and making sure that we are, sharing employees and sharing skill sets as we grow the overall number of people.
All right, and so it looks like you're gonna have the last word here before we take a break.
I love what's going on. It's awesome. And I know it's not about me and it's not about my ego. It's about the community that we serve. And interesting enough is, I love it because we have to be very intentional in which CBOs we're gonna collaborate with. Because it's which CBO is doing the greatest impact. And it doesn't matter at what level or in which community. In the end, it has to be one of those communities, but yes, being poor affects everyone. And then being one of those communities underserved affects everyone. And believe me, those communities, a lot of times you don't even see them around you because they're not part of your daily life. Therefore, we don't even live in the systems, we live in the subsystems. That's what we need, navigators. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, if we want the biggest impact, and we partner with the best CBOs, the ones that are actually get it, the ones that are actually making the biggest impact, I think we'll do okay. It doesn't matter where you are, as long as the money goes there. It's something I was saying this last year, my education, my formal education has, I basically threw it in the garbage. I had to relearn because I'm working with communities, even though I come from one of those, Rockwood has blown my mind. Over 90 languages. The thing is, we're using a model from the county, which is popular education, for navigators of systems. It has blown my mind. It has taken me 7 months, and it will take me probably all my life to understand it. But it's not about putting ideas in their head. It's about getting their ideas out and understand them and meet them where they are. And yes, you're not gonna, you do it intentionally, but maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of them will break the cycle in their families. That those are the ones we're going for. Like, it's not about, it's the impact. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna do the credit number 1. I'm gonna let you all take a short break, 5 minutes. We're gonna come back at 2:30, but before you go, I want to do 2 things. One is, I want you to focus on this piece of paper when we come back, right? This is the formal proposal. This is the box. And you've heard how we got to this box. So this will be our point of reference for any consensus building we do after the break. Secondly, if you are in a place where you are thinking you're going to be showing us a yellow or a red card, what I really want you to do during this break is formulate your suggestion very specifically for how to fix that issue. So that when we come back and if we're doing some consensus building around it, you have a notion of how to change this proposal on this piece of paper to make it work for you. Okay? All right, 5 minutes, go. All right, well, let's proceed. So we have a proposal on the table, which I had in my hand. There we go. Somewhere. It's that sheet that I showed you earlier. It has the proposal all on one page. I would encourage you to look at that, not at the slides, because the slides, although easier to read, are missing some of the nuance and detail that are actually in the actual document. So, and the proposal itself is on the back side of the sheet, so the front is more background information with guiding principle. Thank you. And then the guiding principles, foundation principles, and the scope. The backside is the actual proposed RFA. So, and that's a very abbreviated summary. But so thinking about that and bearing in mind my assignment to you, if you are contemplating every yellow card, let's see. Steve's just gonna have to shout his card out from the back. Oh, perfect. Okay. She said that, and I didn't believe her. Okay. All right. So let's see, where are we at with this? So there's a proposal on the table for an RFA, single RFA, 2 focuses, as discussed and clarified with the conversation. Let's see your cards, everybody. See where we're at. Greens. Oh, and just to clarify, so okay, I've got to see a yellow right there. So to clarify, those who, the cards I want to see are from folks that are members of the consortium or alternates that are here representing their members. So, so no 1 vote per entity, but it's, and I know there are some folks here who are representing an absent member, so that's good. If your member is also here, then the alternate should not be showing you cards, please. Okay, once again, sorry. Cards, let's see your cards. Sorry if you're in, there we go. That's all 3. Okay, thank you. I don't know what that is different. All right, 2, 3 yellow. Okay, so we've got 3 yellow cards. So hopefully you all are remembering my suggestion that you come equipped with a proposed amendment. So I'll start with Dave.
Well, I'll just follow up where my question was before the break, just around, I guess, to express my own preference of peanut butter, where you're trying to spread around as many priorities as possible versus depth and impact. To me, depth and impact, I mean, particularly this is your $100, so it's not a continual program. So is there some principle around trying to maximize impact within the bounds of the statute, within the bounds of, I guess, like that's something that was in the principles of the guidance.
That's more of a question.
No. And preferences. Feels to me like that should be present.
Do you have a suggestion for how to make that present in there? If it's not already, and I don't know if that's something that's already in the text. Okay. So contemplate for a minute, and we'll come back, or someone else has a suggestion. I have to. Daniel.
Yeah, my concern with documents surrounding the verbiage as laid out, the other concerns previously brought up about it being easily interpreted as an exclusionary policy. It's very present, especially coming to fresh eyes. It's what I read within this document is that it's exclusively beneficiary to those of priority communities and not to anybody outside of those entities. So my proposal for this would be elimination of any reference to community basis or priority communities in the main body of the text, and instead having a clarification at the end of the text body stating that things such as outreach exclusively would be given additional effort for outreach to priority communities would be given, but whereas that would make it less likely to be interpreted that the actual efforts and benefits are exclusively for those priority communities.
Thank you, Daniel. And I want to recognize what Jennifer said a little bit earlier, which is that the priority populations are exactly who this bill was written for. So we can't really change that language.
Okay, yeah, and I'm not proposing to eliminate it entirely from the document, I'm saying, to separate out the main body. So to define that our target is to increase the outreach to those communities and present them with the opportunities to get into industry. But beyond that, we do want to include, people outside of those communities as well, for these programs.
I just want to clarify because I'm trying to capture edits.
Jennifer is our.
I'm the note taker, that's other duties as a slave. I think, Dana, what I hear you proposing is that for the two focus areas, they would read intentional outreach to and intentional outreach. Maybe you can help with language, but intentional outreach and career awareness and exploration. And then earn and learn opportunities, or both, with the understanding that priority populations are the emphasis of all investments in future ready Oregon.
I would say that the priority populations being the emphasis of the outreach portion. Because my understanding from the conversation previously is that the individuals that do not find themselves within the priority populations are not excluded from participation in this.
They would not be excluded from participation in programs, but applications must prioritize. So projects or programs included in applications must prioritize participation by individuals from their priority populations. So that is embedded in all of the funding. But what I hear you saying is that you would recommend removing that from the two focus areas as an explicit call out, and rather relying on the embedding of that in all of the funding decisions.
I see, actually, your clarification there, that leaves me in opposition to this. Due to it does create a scenario of exclusion along these priority lines for individuals that may not meet one or more of these criteria.
Okay.
Maybe Jennifer, you can read the criteria again, because it, like, the actual criteria in the legislation calls out that it includes others, but it's targeted, maybe.
Right, the statute, I can read that definition again, but the statute reads that the program will award grants to projects or programs that prioritize equitable program participation by individuals from priority populations. That's in the statute and would be included in any request for application.
See, my concern there is that it creates an incentive structure for entities to do exactly that, prioritize individuals for promotion and grant of opportunity based on the definition shown in that priority communities.
Okay, I that's what the law says, so I can't change that based on the recommendations of this group.
All right, well, there's a few things here, but, I want to sort of double down on what Daniel was saying. I do, for one, this is maybe grammatical, but I would maybe change the way that the first focus is, written, to say something more similar to what Jennifer just said, like intentional outreach to and awareness and exploration of manufacturing careers for priority populations, although I am more aligned with kind of the potential solution that Jennifer raised over removing priority populations from the focus areas and identifying them within the eligibility criteria. Because, and aligning that language very clearly with what's outlined in the statute to make it very clear of what the requirements are. Again, and I might be at a little bit of a disadvantage here because I don't know exactly how this recommendation turns into the RFA. So how exactly us identifying these focus areas, you know, these additional criteria get drafted into the RFA is unknown to me. And so I don't know, Jennifer, if you can provide any clarification there on like how you guys would use this recommendation, because kind of gets back to what Steve said initially of like, what are we actually voting on? Or what are we actually agreeing to, trying to get to for consensus? That I think would help me potentially move from a yellow to a green, in addition to the recommendation around removing the priority populations into the general criteria.
I think it might. Am I on?
Better.
It's green.
than you're on.
It's green, but it's.
Here, this is. We can do it.
Maybe it's on now, and it goes muted magic. I think it would be helpful, maybe, to take these one at a time. Because there's more detail, if you go back a couple of slides, Ronan. This is the detail that's on your handout. And what you are voting on is the content of the memo. So the memo that incorporates what the funding work group is recommending. And you can make specific edits to any of this content. So if there is something more specific you want to add to the list of projects that prioritize, or language that revises how the main focus area is stated, any of those are on the table. Additions, edits, and maybe it's helpful to just take one at a time, given that the feedback is specific to one or the other. That would be my suggestion.
I'm happy to go with you guys. I'm just trying to pick out the cards that were already out there.
Just for some context, to Daniel, to your comments, I served on, and there might be others in the room that served on the committee that put the Future Ready Oregon bill together. And Jennifer staffed that in the position she was in prior to this role. And the goal of the committee and the legislation was to very specifically address the individuals in the state who were most negatively impacted by the pandemic. So that is why the legislation has these 10 priority populations. And we, as a committee here, don't get to have any impact on that because it is in the legislation. So I think that for our role now, how can we take those priority populations, recognizing that as the legislation, and have a result that is the best possible for our state, for those priority populations, for our economy, and for the manufacturers that we're serving.
Might be a suggestion that also turns into a question. The key word, Jennifer, that you read in the legislation that seemed to me to be really important are equitable participation of. And I wonder if it's worth including that in the title so that's really clear. And Kim, you might be able to comment on this because of your participation in legislation. If the applicants don't deliberately in their proposal focus on the equitable participation of priority populations, I think we are not meeting the intent of the legislation. But in that context, those projects will be widely open, but they must be deliberately addressing equitable participation. And I wonder if that being more explicit about that particular language will help address Daniel's concern, maybe Amanda's, maybe Ben's point earlier about how you don't want to necessarily stigmatize priority populations in terms of their pathways. So I'd argue for getting that language in appropriately and a bit more in this document.
Why don't I read back what I've typed to see if that resonates? Intentional outreach, career awareness, and exploration that prioritizes equitable participation by individuals from priority populations.
Steve, probably today. Sage folks, and we have Steve, Sage, Steve, and Kathy.
Scary. I also was on the coalition that helped create the legislation. So yeah, it was a very intentional effort there, and it was really about focusing and partnering with those groups so that the opportunities got to them in culturally responsive ways. But I'll say, as a community college, when we do outreach, we can partner with specific groups, do messaging in specific ways to make sure we're including all communities, but everyone is included in our workforce training programs. And I think that's, to me, that's the distinction, is making sure that you're doing that outreach for inclusion.
Well said.
Let's see. Hold on, Steve. So, you know, part of the committee and then also being industry, I think we look at things a little bit different than education. And when I'm listening to those conversations we had around these things, some of the same things came up for me, you know, are we equitable? But when you look at what we're trying to do is decide on funding that's gonna create programs that's gonna bring more people in to funnel the workforce. You know, that's where you have to kind of step back. So I think those changes that Jennifer made where, you know, you have a little bit more, you know, it talks about equitable, but again, focusing on getting more priority population into these programs. The programs happen and the programs have, you know, everyone in them. It's just, we gotta make sure we're doing the outreach to get more people into it.
I think the language is fine, and, those are.
Which language, the language that
Well,
this, or that, Jennifer proposes?
the language that's in the legislation is fine, and as far as getting more clarity, so there is the Future Ready Oregon bill, but you also have to understand the Workforce Opportunity Innovation Act, which is what kind of defines how the Future Ready is then written so that it can go in partnerships with that. So you have to really understand the languages in both of those. And then it's also how the heck is interpreting that. And so you gotta go back and look at what other rewards, what other organization have been rewarded, and then you at that point are gonna have to figure out what does equitable mean. And of course, you've got the equitable document, the 2 or 3 page document you need to review that gives you lots of options. But at the end of the day, whoever is writing for it, they have to really understand how the heck is gonna do it. The people that are reviewing, because they have a deep understanding of what the legislation is and prior preferences. And so you have to give them a different way to go away from that, but you have to understand what it's all based upon. So workforce opportunity innovation, you haven't studied it, get yourself some tea. Get ready to work. All three.
Right, okay, Ben, and then, yeah.
Because I always one of the concerns. I think, one, I appreciate the language change. I think the language is good. And I would just say, one other way I think to think about this is, as industrial companies or manufacturing companies, we have not always been good at looking for people in the populations that we're talking about. So to me, the way I reframe this is about looking for people in areas that we historically have done poorly in an effort to expand our workforce pipeline. Full stop. So this is not about, so to be clear, it's not about excluding somebody. Anyone can get into a program. We have no trouble reaching certain populations, right? We have a lot of trouble reaching other ones. That's what this is about. That is what the prioritization needs to be. And I think just probably as you continue to talk about it publicly, one way to think about talking about it is, this is about growing the pie, not targeting a specific part.
Yeah, I do appreciate the changes that Jennifer highlighted. I think that for this specific one, if it's the will of the ELT to do separate, maybe polling on them, I think that really helps. I do wanna clarify too, that what we have on our page is not exactly what's up on the screen. So for those that are only looking at the screen and not looking at your page, we need to be clear about what we are polling. So for instance, the first bullet point includes outreach to priority populations, including K through 12. That is not what is right up there. So just wanna clear that up. Honestly, I think that not having priority populations in that is helpful in that specific bullet point. And I would agree more with what's on the screen. I do wanna ask, I don't know who this would be a question for, somebody that was on the funding group, but for D, it's not, they're not lettered there on our sheet, but, letter D is related to industry commitment, and this is kind of what Ben was talking about. Although I very much so agree with what this is saying, we have to also recognize that for the most part, industry cannot directly apply for these funds. So are we asking something here, having a criteria for industry when industry can't directly apply for these grants? So it's just kind of a question, and in my mind, it almost seems like that should be deleted as far as one of these, because it seems a little bit outside of the scope of the actual application and who can apply. Although industry is typically, there's industry partners that are typically engaged in these projects. If you're working with a CBO, is it the onus of the CBO to hold the industry accountable to do that in letter D and report on that? It just seems a little out of place, but happy to have somebody help me understand.
Does someone from the committee want to address that?
Yes.
Okay.
So I appreciate that question, and I was on the working group, and I think that when we met and discussed it, we were saying that whoever's applying for these funds needs to do X, Y, and Z, and one of those is to engage your industry partners and make sure that you have a place for this pipeline we're creating with K through 12 and all of these, communities we're reaching into to, inform about the manufacturing industry in general, that they're engaging with business. They're not working in a silo or just with the community colleges, but there's a place for people to go. So it's incumbent upon the applicant, as I read it, to make sure and demonstrate that you're working closely with the business community.
Yeah, Gustavo, thanks. Gustavo and Kyle.
It's not related to this, but I want to tell you it's related to this. This is the thing. I haven't met anyone, and welcome to anytime you want to come to Rockwood, let's walk a little bit. The community it has a heart, and they're such a hard working community, and they really don't ask for much. And the interesting thing is, I know there's Rockwood community, but this community reflects a lot of places in the state. What I want to tell you is, if we do our job right, a lot of these people in this community will have access to a better quality of life. They will enter the system in a way that they can get better job, better pay. If we screw this up, well, the manufacturer is gonna pay for it, because in the end, they're not gonna get quality people. These are quality freaking employees, quality, hardworking people. A lot of them immigrants and refugees. You have to understand, yes, there's a lot of white people around, and if they wanna work in other places, that's fine. But if they're poor and they wanna work, they probably will find space in the manufacturing, as everybody else. Just understand, if we miss this opportunity to do it the best way possible with the greatest impact, manufacturing is gonna lose in getting good people in.
Kyle and then Sadie.
Thank you. I also wanted to just respond to D on the first outreach, which is about the industry commitment. And I do not disagree with this statement as written, but I wonder if, as an alternative, we ought to just say deep industry engagement. Because what this feels a little bit to me as though this is dictating practices that industry would do, including training of managers and supervisors on creating programs. Now, I don't disagree with that. I think that needs to be done. We need to create that inclusive culture. But I just wonder, as written, if it puts community-based organizations or K-12 systems or others in a position where they're saying, okay, industry, you must do these kinds of training, as opposed to having a statement that is a little bit broader, representing really deep partnership and engagement with industry.
I have a response to this meeting.
Yeah. See,
Oh, I just was gonna kind of to the point of the call outs and priority populations inside of it. I mean, I don't know that we actually technically need it listed in it because it's in everything for the legislation. So if that's the sticking point, like I'll say I'm not opposed to removing specific call outs because it's over everything. And then one other quick thing, which I know we intended it to be in there, but we didn't actually list as when we were talking about this, such as we got stipends, we didn't actually list tuition, which I think Kristen was mentioning this earlier. That we intended for it to be in there, but it would probably be nice to actually specifically call it out.
Clarify, that's on this.
Yeah.
That's on the second focus area.
Sorry, yes, on the early learning opportunities, I just, instead of making another comment, I figured I'd add that in there.
so tuition gets added to exactly where?
To the list,
To the asterisk area.
yeah, such as stipends
Yeah.
to whatever.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I wanted to respond a little bit to Kyle's question and the group discussion around that is. And I mean, if we wanna do engagement instead of commitment as a different word, totally cool, but we just wanted to make sure that we were clear that the goal isn't just to take, like, let's say these 5, 16-year-old girls and drop them into a manufacturing floor for an apprenticeship and just be like, good luck. Like, I think there should be some support for industry to both understand that like cultural navigators, like we use navigators a lot. So however, that's just kind of, that could be reworded, but I think that was kind of the intention of the group, just to make sure that there is also a strategy around that diversification of a primarily white male dominated field. And then to the wraparound supports, I agree, I mean, listing out a few, for example, blah, 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 fine.
I guess, on D, recognizing that this focus area is really about like communications. It seems like outreach, creating awareness, recognizing exploration. That's where it seems like D doesn't really fit. Like, if this is about how we communicate and how we're engaging and outreaching to the potential employees, that's where it's like, it makes a jump there, that, I almost feel like D would make more sense under the second focus area than under the first, perhaps. But to the point of like maybe providing suggestions, including it, but alternative language, whether it's the inclusion of the industry or even like prioritizing, projects that prioritize, well-defined career pathways into the manufacturing industry or something like that, that would put the onus on the applicant to work with industry to develop those career pathways to ensure that there is a place for people to go following the outreach. I think that's absolutely fine. But again, getting into like the business practices and exactly what you need to do and commitment, I think that's where the sticking point is for me on that specific one.
Are you proposing to move the second?
I mean, it could be, but if we did something along like,
And replace
I mean, it could be fine, it could still be fine if we did something, if we changed the language indeed to be, projects that prioritize career pathways following outreach or something with industry, so something to tie it more into kind of this comms outreach point that is the focus area, right?
Jennifer, did you try?
I think so, but then I have to clarify.
Yeah.
I appreciate that comment. I'm wondering if C already does that. C in the first one already does the career pathway piece.
Yeah.
And then what I've captured is a proposal to move D from 1 to 2.
That would make more sense.
Okay, and further discussion, I just wanna make sure I capture those two pieces accurately. Okay.
We have Ben and then.
Yeah, I was gonna say what you said. But I agree with moving to the second one, but I think it's important here to capture what you just said, which is that the onus should be on the funding recipient to have a relationship with industry that ensures that what they are doing is going to provide employees, future employees for the companies that they can actually use. So a language here that actually is a bit more directive, I think is important, that almost requires that relationship to exist as part of the proposal. I would really want to nail on that point. And then I had a question.
Before we move on, can you provide a specific language and where you would?
So I agree that it should go in our environments because I think it's clearer, it's actually about actual action that someone's kind of an entity has to take. And I think it would be demonstrated industry partnership for potential career pathway or experiential learning or there's other language here that it's but like where was mentioned regional. Where's the language on like regionally relevant training, like so it's like training basically that matches the. But I think demonstrated industry partnership is the top level language that's important.
Okay. And I just want to clarify. Are you saying demonstrated industry partnership should be in both? And if yes, does the third bullet under additional criteria already do them?
The additional criteria.
Yes and no, I'm not sure prioritize is correct, I think it should require.
Okay, under both or just earn and learn?
Both is fine. Divide my gears, I think it's required.
Okay, and under foundational principles, where it says funding should intentionally engage employers, communities from priority populations, and other education workforce development partners, that language is also not strong enough. I just want to clarify and make sure that I'm capturing your recommendation.
I think that's closer to being strong enough.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
And so that's foundational to all of the future ready Oregon investments. Do you want additional language added to the criteria here?
Sorry, say that.
The foundational principles apply to all future ready Oregon funding opportunities. But if you are recommending that we add something more explicit, I just want to know if that should be under earn and learn, under outreach, or under additional criteria that applies to both.
Is there an order in which you would this is a question about how you actually score an application, is there an order on which you would score it? Is it go like the first with the second one and then applying to both, or do the ones that apply to both have equal weight?
So irrelevant to scoring criteria, you are recommending that the HEC prioritize projects that do these things. And so these are specific to outreach, the other list is specific to earn and learn, the additional criteria apply to both.
Yes.
And you're saying HEC should prioritize projects that do these things.
Yeah.
Right, so that requiring industry partnership. Are you saying we should add that to one of the lists or something that applies to both?
It should
Just
apply.
strengthen the statement. Okay, and you're saying that the statement that's already included in the additional criteria is not strong.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so then propose an edit and I will capture it.
Okay, let me think about it. And then we just have a question, because it's the note about training supervisors, et cetera. Is given that companies cannot actually apply for the grant, is somebody, say, just an example, a person who worked within a company to train supervisors or hiring managers, for example, is that something that actually could be funded with them?
This is saying this is, the way it's currently written, is saying that HAC should prioritize earn and learn, well, I shouldn't say that. As proposed, because the proposal is to move D to earn and learn. So under that scenario, you would be saying that HAC should prioritize earn and learn opportunities that demonstrate an industry commitment to increasing diversity and retention of priority populations. And that commitment can include, but is not limited to, these things. And that HEC should prioritize projects that include proposals that demonstrate that commitment.
I think let me be clear, let me just be clear. Can the grant pay for someone to work at bigger who does that, or does it have to be someone?
Yes.
CBO who's trained?
The eligible applicants are CBOs and workforce service providers, but the activity that you've mentioned is an eligible activity under the criteria.
Let me just do this real quickly. So, CBO, and I'm gonna use Kathy over there, that's industry. You knew this coming. So the idea is that, if I'm getting it correct, that I should have a relationship with Kathy deep enough to know what she would need in order for the project to be implemented. And if that means that in the grant that I'm writing, it includes staff training and stuff to build her team to be able to do the project that we are representing and investing in together, it should be covered. But I think that's how it would show up, that you're asking that the relationship from a CBO to an industry partner is deep enough that you've gone through that, and it's not like, hey, Kathy, I know you from this meeting, write me a support letter, and then we try to figure it out later. It's not deep enough to really know that she needs certain things inside to be able to do that job. Does that sound correct?
And I think we're getting a little bit in the weeds.
I know.
Right? So what I want to do is pull us up to eligible activities. And again, these are in your previous meeting materials for reference. But activities that are eligible for funding include paid work experience, stipends and wages, tuition and fee assistance, wraparound services, which is fairly broad and undefined, culturally and linguistically specific career pathways development, and organizational investments, very broad, but includes hiring staff, developing organizational development strategies, purchasing equipment, technology, other training related supplies, administrative costs, and any other activity identified in a grant proposal as necessary to administer the workforce programs described.
So I think your answer would be yes. For D, could I suggest some language that might, I'm actually coming back to the point Christie that you made about why that B was in there. Could D, moving D under earn and learn, but rewritten as engaging industry partners with a demonstrated commitment to increasing the diversity and retention of priority populations. So the intent being, you engage industry partners, but those partners need to have a commitment to the diversity of their, supporting the diversity of their workforce, as demonstrated by those potentially those items in the second category.
Make sure I got that proposal right. Prioritizing projects that engage industry partners with a demonstrated commitment to.
Correct. And that goes under the next
Under urban learning,
Under.
yeah. Okay, I got it.
All right, we're gonna decide the room here.
So just a clarification on retention D in the top part under potential outreach, career awareness, and exploration. As a high school teacher, we also retain these people, and so it's not just retention in the workplace. So I think D is good up top as well. Like we want to add it to the bottom, that's great. But a big problem for us is retaining young women in our program, and 2 Fortune 500 companies are coming to our school to help us with that. And so that would be a great example of an application of this.
I was just gonna echo that. I think, you know, in the wording, everyone's gonna read it differently, but the outreach needs to be very specific. It can't just look one way, you know? So I think it's important to have it at that, like, the earn and learn is kind of like, now I'm signed up and I'm in the program, but it's like, how do you get people in the program? And that includes, like, Kathy isn't gonna be like, I know how to do, I'm just gonna do all of this, like, culturally appropriate recruitment, or, you know, all of those things. That's where that partnership bill comes into play. So I would just advocate to keep it in the outreach, because it does mean a lot of different things, like the outreach, you know.
They're not gonna get.
I am actually very opposed to removing D from the outreach part, because if you don't know who your industry partners are, you don't have an outreach program. Because that's part of it from an educator point of view, is we need to know who those educator or those industry partners are, and we need to be able to go and access them. And so their commitment to us is crucial for a really quality outreach program. And so whatever way we want to say it, but it needs to be a commitment to increasing the diversity is fine, because that's our commitment, that they are willing to open their doors for us to be able to show off what they do and how important it is for our community and how important it is for young people to go and see what they're doing. And it doesn't look like flash dance anymore. That's what I would say. So don't remove it.
I'm
very positive about that, so please don't take it out.
I got Steve over there.
Oh.
Yes, I want to echo what she just said, take D out. Because, so.
What's that? No, said don't take it out.
No, oh, my bad, that's so this is an issue that I have. This is an issue I have with D, okay? Because when I said you judge the applicant upon their connection with the industry. So you can see how strong that connection is, along with the size of the group that you're dealing with and the scalability. So when you start putting that language in there, so my firm participated in the Department of Administrative Services disparity study for the construction industry, who were trying to figure out why they weren't able to close that disparity gap despite their COVID system of how to do it, okay? It does not work because the industry ends up just gaming the system. And, you know, they set aspirational goals of 30% of the work going to minority workers and 20% of the work going to minority firms. It failed miserably. So you have to start with the willing. And the willing are the ones that are already working with organizations. You start with there and backfill from there. Because there's no incentive for industry to get involved. Because their incentive is give me a pool of qualified applicants. That's it. So I would not put any industry commitment. You just focus on the strength of the applicants' connection to the industry. And you reward those that have the strongest and deepest relationship with the industry and use them as a model. And I would once again point to Hillsborough High School, just reverse engineer what they did, because they did it all right.
I'm not trying to manage everybody, but here it goes. Are we able to recenter these get closer to calling a vote. Cause I think we're gonna get deeper and deeper into the weeds, and I think that task, and I'm not sure if I'm correct, the task that we're getting into is the task that Heck has to work out and then report back on how they did it. I think this is the guiding principles, and they'll have to come down and figure it out. And they also hopefully recognize that we will hold them accountable for what we said here. So it doesn't, it's not like it's a one-time thing. So I'm just wondering if that's possible.
Yeah, so I think, I would note that we have about 5 minutes left.
Oh.
And we're not necessarily super close here. But I think it's worth taking a little poll. I mean, there are a whole bunch of cards that we would begin to have time to address all of them in 5 minutes. So let's just take the temperature now. Well, yes, I'm gonna ask you, Jennifer, to be back kind of where your assessment is of where we're at in terms of proposed modifications, and then we'll go from there.
You want me to do that now?
If you're with.
I am, but you took one of my.
Oh.
Okay. So I think that I have captured 3 edits specifically. 2 of them I'm certain about and 1 of them I'm not certain about. So the first one is on the one that's on the slide, changing the focus area to read intentional outreach, career awareness and exploration that prioritizes equitable participation by individuals from priority populations. That's edit number 1. Amendment number 2 is on the second one. Ronan, if you could pop forward a slide. In the italicized asterisk, that would read, earn and learn opportunities are those that provide compensation for priority populations to participate in training opportunities that lead to employment, such as stipends, on-the-job training, paid internships, scholarships, tuition reimbursement, etc. So it adds scholarships and tuition reimbursement. And then the third is the one I'm not sure about, but where I think you all are headed is that D should actually apply to both. So I have added it to the additional criteria, taking it out of the first one, not adding it to the second one, but adding it to the additional criteria. And rewording it to say, engage industry partners with a demonstrated commitment to increasing diversity and retention of priority populations. That commitment can include, but is not limited to, training for managers and supervisors on creating and maintaining culturally appropriate and inclusive workplaces and training opportunities. In the additional criteria would then apply to both above. I lied, there's a 4th. The 4th, I think, Dave, what I heard you say is that Heck should prioritize awards to maximize the impact. Okay, so that's 4, and I'm not certain I captured those precisely, but those would be the 4 that you would be voting on.
All right, does everyone understand or track those, just to make sure everybody understands what Jennifer just covered? Any questions on that? All right, let's see where we're at. What's up today here? So let's see your cards. Where are we at here? Got 3. Red card, 3 red cards. And the rest are green. So that is where we are at. We don't really have time to dive into the red cards, so.
Can we ask for folks with red cards to share why they
Yes.
have red?
Yeah. As long as we'll go in a couple of minutes over. So we have 3 red cards. There we go. Start with men, and we'll go right to the left.
Ryan, I just think the language is still not quite. Want that engagement to be directed. Right. So I actually put a potential language edit here which takes that third bullet, and just after the word organizations. The second line, just adds with knowledge of and programs geared toward meeting workforce needs as well as, and kicking back in. Trying to require that they demonstrate that in industry partnership, not telling them they should engage, like.
Could you repeat those words
Yeah,
for me?
so after the words organizations.
Mhm.
With knowledge of and programs geared toward meeting workforce needs as well as, and then just kick back into the, well, just insert that. Yeah,
Why don't, I captured that, why don't we go ahead and others and then we.
I'll say that I concur with Ben with that language and not having the additional language that Jennifer proposed. And I'll notate specifically, because I am concerned around the language of the state and this group basically saying what industry needs to do. And I'd be concerned that industry would have to sign some sort of attestation for those types of business practices in order for the PEC to understand that we have a commitment. So again, not that I personally feel like having a commitment for diversity and inclusion of priority populations is bad. I just feel like it's an oversight.
Yeah, I agree, having the verbiage in pepper to directive in this industry is unnecessary as from an employer's perspective, it's verbiage that we are not capable of acting on due to restriction of policy and lines put in place for discrimination law. We cannot award opportunity to individuals based on the criteria outlined for these populations. So, yes.
Clarifying question, if we update the language to say engage industry partners with a demonstrated commitment to increasing diversity and retention of priority populations. So HEC should prioritize projects that do that, but remove the specific language around what that commitment should or could include. Does that address your concerns, or you would still be?
you're talking about basically.
The item D, yeah, if we move that to additional criteria, so that applies across. We update the language as we've been talking about, engage industry partners with a demonstrated commitment to. But then strike the second sentence that gives an explanation of what that means. Does that address the concern?
I'm just unclear how the heck would want a CBO or another applicant to. Or an industry partner to. What you guys would want to see in the application to ensure that that criteria was being met.
And so I just want to reinforce that this would be making a recommendation that we prioritize projects that demonstrate an engagement with industry partners that have demonstrated a commitment to increasing diversity and retention of priority populations. And we would not then define them.
And I'm saying, I don't understand how you would judge that, is what I'm saying. Is that?
Yeah, I'm just saying, I think there's two challenges that we have here. One is putting the onus on the business is not the recipient. And the second one is any kind of requirement that the business demonstrate that it has a commitment to diversity. Which is another thing that the business, because the business is not the grantee, or it's not the right. It's not, the onus is not on the right entity, the onus needs to be on the grantee to have an engagement with the business, and the focus is on producing people for the workforce pipeline. I think Sage said earlier, this is all under the umbrella of priority population, so there's no need for any language that discusses the diversity commitments of the business. Whether specific or not, like it's not necessary.
Okay, I think it might be helpful to hear, and I just am concerned that we're at time and we don't wanna lose our quorum. But it might be helpful to hear from someone in the funding work group as to why this component of the funding recommendations was critical. I don't know that that will be helpful at this point, but I don't want my voice to be the one representing the work of the work group.
What was discussed when we did it was about, if you're setting people up with training from underserved populations, you don't want them to go into an unsafe or hostile workplace. And so I think, I'm just thinking about, you're right, like the industry isn't being funded, right? It's the other partners that are, but I think about if we're doing outreach and education, if we're highlighting, and I'll pick on you because we have a strong partnership with Bigger, if we're highlighting welding training, we want to make sure that the populations coming into the training program will then be put into the big population, and we could potentially with this funding be touting a relationship with Bigger, so there would be a benefit to Bigger, which actually on the example of our program, like very high amount of women start through the program, which the welding industry traditionally hasn't had. So like that could be a success rate touted to get more students in. So, but I think that only doing that with industry that had those kind of strong commitments, so they can see that it's a safe environment they'd be going into once they do the training. We don't want to put somebody in training that then can't use it because it's unsafe.
I mean, just really quick, I'll just read it.
I guess I'd like to come back and maybe, we have a proposal, I think on the table to simply strike it. I want to come back to the point Steve made, I think this is really important. If the CDO is really effectively engaging priority populations, and they are deeply engaged with industry, per Ben's suggestion that that be strong, we don't need to specify this, we can trust the CDO to be engaged effectively with these populations. But I get the point made by the group, but I would propose that as a possible solution to get us over the hump and to consensus. So I'd like to just put that on.
So Jennifer, do you have a readback that would incorporate that and we'll hold on it?
Okay, so I think the motion right now is the recommendations as presented with the revision to the main focus area description on intentional outreach, the addition of scholarships and tuitions to the definition of earn and learn. And then under additional criteria, we would have, oh, I'm sorry, so we would strike D from intentional outreach. And under additional criteria, we would say HEC should prioritize awards to maximize impact. And then we should revise the third bullet to say HEC should prioritize proposals that demonstrate partnerships with employers and community-based organizations with knowledge of and programs geared towards meeting workforce needs, intentionally engaging communities from priority populations and other education and workforce development partners. And then we would strike D altogether.
No.
Everyone understand?
So we're not gonna be worried about retaining, it's just. Can we, like, what? It just seems like we're changing this for like use three over there, and it seems a little bit unfair. So, like, when do we get to the vote point? Because we're pressed on time now, and so that's my point. I have a huge problem retaining females, and yeah, that's it.
I just want to clarify, I think the proposal was that the third bullet under additional criteria addresses the engagement with industry.
But we're not talking about retention.
it applies to both retention and outreach.
Maybe.
Okay,
Additional.
so what you're saying is that by eliminating D and retaining the third point under additional criteria, we lose the element of retention of priority populations.
Yeah, caring about retaining people.
So so then proposal, the third bullet under additional criteria could read, HEC should prioritize proposals that demonstrate partnerships with employers and community-based organizations. The addition is with knowledge of and programs geared towards meeting workforce needs. And then we could say intentionally engaging. We could add retention there, intentionally engaging. I would need someone else to give me words, but we could add the retention element there so that it's not lost, if that's the sticking point.
I need to go. Yeah.
I just want to know, it's here. We're obviously all supportive of retention. It's like, not one problem.
Yeah.
So I guess my question for you is, are you focused on a commitment of retention by the companies? Or just an effort toward ensuring employees can be retained? And I think we run into the same problem, is requiring company to retain employees.
Yeah.
When they're not the grantee is a challenge.
So I'm in the first category. So yeah, I'm not trying to tell companies what to do. So the problems I see are at the first area, the outreach, awareness, exploration, and education thing. And we can recruit people all day long, but they don't stick around. And so it's important to factor in the retention as well. Not that you like have to retain them, but just that you're considering or you're trying to retain them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so just capturing that somewhere here, like just because somebody comes and sees, doesn't mean we actually made a legit attempt. And so, I mean, yeah.
And I think and your suggestion was that there's a certain level of trust in the CEOs to be.
Yeah, I feel like we switched to a different conversation. I think we can add some language clarifying retention, we're not losing retention. And strike B, which was calling on demonstrated commitment by companies, which would be very difficult to evaluate. And Steve's point being, you just need to be deeply engaged. And if you're a CEO that's deeply engaged and focused on priority populations, that will be sufficient. If we could get there, I think we have consensus.
Yes.
But we could also take a vote, but we've got to specify what the voting is.
Yes. Okay.
I will vote yes because this is stupid. Because you have to understand, if my wife and I wants to get a child, and the child comes from a country that I never been, but I want to help, so I get that child, they don't have a child, but we have this child. Neither of my community, my people, my friends, nobody looks like this child. Nobody knows his culture, nobody knows nothing about this child. If I don't start learning about that culture, I cannot blame the culture's child. I cannot say, oh, just because, people who work with that culture is not helping me, I'm not responsible to raise this child. If it's not safe, if it's not comfortable, if I don't know nothing, the child is probably gonna grow up very miserable. So.
All right, Jennifer, do we have, we'll give it one last shot here.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
So I think I'm genuinely unclear as to whether we are keeping the language as proposed, or if we want to add to that third bullet commitment to increasing diversity and retention of priority populations. The third bullet under additional criteria would now read, HEC should prioritize proposals that demonstrate partnerships with employers and community-based organizations with knowledge of and programs geared towards meeting workforce needs, intentionally engaging communities from priority populations, and other education and workforce development partners with a commitment to increasing diversity and retention of priority populations.
I like that, I kind of capture the legislation, and it keeps the employer engagement and it keeps the retention.
So I think let's pull that and see where we're at. All right. One more time. It's not a game anymore, right? All right, here we go. Cards up. That's number three.
So it's not just stop. It's the partnership between the employer and the.
Yes. Green. Hello.
It is.
Green, green, green. All green but one yellow. So let's just check in on it and. My concern is about the specificity in which we're going, which an employer or industry partner is going about that retention cover. We, as employers will have to be able to use the five criteria as cause for choice or retention, but rather creating work environment, which want to stay, we fall under something that an employer is capable of. You have a suggestion for me?
We should just need to be specific about the employer making a concerted effort to create an environment in which those individuals in the priority populations feel comfortable or wish to stay. Inclusive environment, but getting put in a way so that it's not, so you don't get construed as compulsion to specifically retain individuals based on these criteria when it comes to making choices of whom to retain in the event of layoff or retain.
It's not required. This is not a directive to the employer, how the employer runs their business. So, I think it's clear that. I think.
Yeah, I think your concern is that it's somehow buying the employer to retain particular individuals. That is not what the language says. So it would not be a requirement.
Yeah, the interpretation, it creates, even not a direct binding, it does create an incentive to do so. For participation in this program.
But you want to reread the language and I think we're at the point where we need to go.
Yeah. No, it's to make sure that, okay. The wording for the third. What you're voting on is the proposed amendment to the third. The third bullet under additional criteria would read, PEC should prioritize proposals that demonstrate partnerships with employers and community-based organizations with a knowledge of and programs geared towards meeting workforce needs, intentionally engaging communities from priority populations and other education and workforce development partners with a commitment to increasing diversity and retention of priority populations.
All right, that's good. We're voting yes, I'm turning it over to the.
Yes. Yeah. If you're yes.
With the proposal as amended. We're gonna use the cards.
Sure.
All right. Votes. So we're voting. This is a vote on what's out there. This is stated. So cards up for the vote. Okay, all. Wait, I don't know. Online. Always showing surprise. Very good. So we are unanimous in this group except for Daniel, who's showing yellow card. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.